Blood dripped onto marble floor, each drop a small crimson explosion against white stone. The woman swayed in the doorway of Seattle's most exclusive waterfront restaurant, her designer dress torn, one eye swollen shut, mascara streaking down her face like war paint. Every head turned. Conversations died. She locked eyes with the man in the corner booth, the one everyone pretended not to recognize, and took 3 unsteady steps forward before her knees gave out. Want to know if she survived the night that changed everything? Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment your city below so I can see how far Lena's story travels. This is going to be one hell of a ride. The rain had started an hour before Lena Carter made her decision. Not the gentle Seattle mist that natives wore like a second skin, but the punishing kind that turned streets into rivers and made visibility a joke. She sat in her Mercedes, Marcus's Mercedes technically, 3 blocks from Aquavine, watching the wipers fight a losing battle against the downpour. Her hand shook on the steering wheel. Not from cold. The heating was on full blast, making the car feel like a coffin with climate control. She'd been sitting here for 43 minutes. She knew because she'd checked her phone obsessively, watching the minutes crawl past like prisoners counting down a sentence. Each time the screen lit up, she half expected to see Marcus's name. Each time it didn't appear felt like a temporary reprieve from execution. The restaurant glowed through the rain like a promise. Warm light spilled from floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay. Beautiful people moved inside like dancers in a music box, their problems the kind money could solve. She'd been one of them once, before Marcus showed her what those people really were: accessories, assets, things to be acquired and controlled. Her reflection in the rearview mirror looked like someone else. The woman staring back had a split lip that had bled down her chin and onto her cream silk dress. Valentino, purchased on Marcus's card during what she'd thought was a good week. Her left eye was swelling shut, the bruise already blooming purple and yellow. There were finger marks on her throat. She'd tried to cover them with makeup and failed. She looked like exactly what she was: a woman running out of time and options. Lena had left the house in Laurelhurst with nothing but her purse and the clothes literally on her back. No passport, no cash beyond the $200 in her wallet, no phone charger, no plan beyond the desperate calculation she'd made while Marcus was in the shower, washing her blood off his knuckles. She knew about Adrian Voss because everyone in Seattle's upper echelons knew about Adrian Voss, even if they pretended not to. Especially if they pretended not to. He was the name you didn't say at charity galas, the presence you didn't acknowledge at high-stakes poker games, the number you definitely didn't have saved in your phone under his real name. Marcus had dealt with him once. She'd overheard part of a phone conversation 6 months ago, before things got really bad. Before bad became terrible and terrible became tonight. The memory of Marcus's fist connecting with her ribs made her flinch even now. "You don't fucking embarrass me," he'd said, very calmly, while she'd tried to curl into a ball on their bedroom floor. "You don't contradict me in front of my associates. You smile, you nod, and you keep your goddamn mouth shut. Those are the rules, Lena. They're not complicated." She'd contradicted him about a wine vintage. A wine vintage. He'd recommended a 2015 to his business partner. She'd mentioned, casually, that the 2012 was actually considered the superior year. That was it. That was the crime that had earned her 3 cracked ribs, the split lip, the black eye, and the reminder that Marcus Carter didn't tolerate disrespect from anyone, least of all his wife. The business partner had laughed it off. Marcus had laughed too, in the moment. But she'd known. The second their guests left, she'd known. She'd been right about the wine, incidentally. Not that it mattered. Lena took a shaky breath and checked the mirror one more time. There was no fixing this. She looked like a domestic violence victim because that's what she was. The thought sat in her chest like swallowed glass. She grabbed her purse, Hermes, another gift-wrapped chain, and opened the car door. The rain hit her like a physical force. Within seconds, her dress was plastered to her skin, her carefully styled hair hanging in soaked ropes. Her heels clicked against wet pavement as she ran, or tried to. Running hurt. Everything hurt. The doorman at Aquavine saw her coming and actually took a step back. His hand moved toward his radio. "Please," Lena said. The word came out wrong. Too desperate, too raw. I just need to get inside." He was young, maybe 25, with the kind of face that suggested he'd been hired for looks rather than intimidation skills. He glanced behind her. probably checking for whoever had done this to her, then nodded once. "Ma'am, do you need me to call the police?" The question almost made her laugh. Police. Right. Like Marcus didn't have half of them on his payroll, like she hadn't tried that route before and learned exactly how far civic duty extended when serious money was involved. "No," she managed. "No police. I just need to speak to someone inside." He held the door open, still looking uncertain. She didn't blame him. She was probably violating a dozen health codes just by bleeding in the vicinity of the restaurant. The warmth inside was shocking after the cold rain. So was the silence. Every conversation stopped like someone had pressed pause on reality. Lena stood in the entrance, dripping rainwater and possibly some blood onto imported Italian tile, very aware that she was destroying whatever ambiance these people had paid premium prices to enjoy. The maitre d' approached with a carefully blank expression. "Madam, I'm afraid—" "Adrian Voss," Lena interrupted. Her voice sounded stronger than she felt. "He's here. I need to speak with him." The maitre d's expression flickered, surprise, concern, calculation. "I'm not at liberty to discuss our guests. Tell him Lena Carter needs to speak with him. Tell him it's about Marcus Carter, and it can't wait." She watched him process the names. The flicker became understanding. Not good understanding, the kind of understanding that suggested she'd just admitted to playing in traffic. "Please wait here," he said quietly, then disappeared toward the back of the restaurant. Lena stood there and tried not to collapse. Her ribs screamed with each breath. The adrenaline that had carried her from the car was starting to fade, leaving behind the shakes and the recognition of just how monumentally she'd gambled. She could feel every eye in the restaurant on her. A woman at the nearest table had her phone out, either texting or taking photos. Probably both. By tomorrow morning, this would be all over Seattle's social circles. The Carter wife making a scene, looking like something dragged behind a truck. Good, part of her thought viciously. Let them see. Let them all see what Marcus Carter does behind closed doors. The other part, the part that had learned survival through silence, wanted to run. This was insane. She was cornered and desperate people made fatal mistakes. Adrian Voss was not a hero. He was arguably worse than Marcus, just with better PR and more careful brutality. She was about to turn around, to bolt back into the rain and figure out literally anything else, when she felt the shift in the room. He came from the back corner booth, moving through the restaurant like he owned it. Which he probably did, along with half the city. Adrian Voss was not what Lena had expected, though she wasn't sure what she had expected. The rumors painted him as a monster. The financial papers occasionally mentioned him as a private investor and real estate developer. Marcus had called him useful but unpredictable in that overheard conversation. In person, he was tall, maybe 6'2", with dark hair cut precisely, and a face that was more interesting than handsome. Sharp cheekbones, strong jaw, eyes that were probably gray or maybe blue, hard to tell in the low light. He wore a charcoal suit that cost more than most people's cars and moved with the kind of controlled grace that suggested violence was always an option, just not the first one. He stopped 3 feet away from her and just looked, not at her face, at the injuries. The calculation in his eyes was almost clinical. "Mrs. Carter," he said. His voice was quieter than she'd expected, with a faint accent she couldn't place. "You're bleeding on their floor." "I know," Lena said. "I'm sorry. I didn't know where else to go." "The police station is 4 blocks north." "The police won't help me." Something flickered across his face. Not quite amusement. "And you think I will?" "I think you might find what I know about my husband valuable enough to consider it." That got his attention. His eyes shifted from her injuries to her face, really looking at her for the first time. Lena felt weighed, measured, assessed like a potential investment. "You're either very brave or very stupid," Adrian said. "I'm very desperate," Lena corrected. "There's a difference." He was silent for a long moment. The entire restaurant seemed to be holding its breath. Then he turned to the maitre d' who had materialized at his elbow like a nervous ghost. "My car, now, and have someone clean this up." He turned back to Lena. "Can you walk?" "Yes." "Then walk, before your husband decides to finish what he started and makes an even bigger mess of my evening." It wasn't kindness, it wasn't even sympathy, but it was a chance. and Lena had learned to grab those with both hands when they appeared. She followed him through the restaurant. People tried not to stare and failed completely. The woman with the phone was definitely recording now. Tomorrow's headlines were writing themselves. The back exit led to a private parking area where a black Mercedes SUV waited, engine already running. Adrian opened the back door himself and gestured for her to get in. Lena hesitated. This was the moment. Once she got in that car, there was no going back. Marcus would find out. He always found out. And this, running to Adrian Voss, this was the kind of betrayal that got people disappeared. "Mrs. Carter," Adrian said, his patience clearly finite. "In or out? Decide." She got in. The interior smelled like leather and money. Adrian slid in beside her, and the driver pulled out before her door was even fully closed. They moved through Seattle's streets in silence, the city sliding past in streaks of neon and rain. Lena stared at her hands. They were still shaking. "Where are we going?" she finally asked. "Somewhere your husband can't follow," Adrian said. He was looking at his phone, scrolling through something. "You said you have information. I assume you mean about his business operations." "Yes." "What kind of information?" Lena took a breath, feeling her ribs protest. "The kind that could destroy him. Financial records, client lists, details about his trafficking operations. I've been documenting everything for 2 years." That made Adrian look up from his phone. "Trafficking. Women, mostly. Some drugs, but primarily women. He runs them through his import company, uses shipping containers marked as furniture. I have dates, locations, names of everyone involved." "And why," Adrian said slowly, "would the wife of a trafficking operation keep such detailed records?" "Because I knew eventually I'd need leverage," Lena said. "I knew he'd go too far, and I'd need a way out. I just didn't realize how bad it would get before I could use it." Adrian studied her again with those calculating eyes. "You're not just desperate, you're smart." Smart would have been not marrying him. "Perhaps. Where are these records?" "Safe deposit box, Bank of Seattle, downtown branch. Only I can access it." "Convenient." "Self-preservation," Lena corrected. "If I die or disappear, the box goes to the FBI automatically. I set it up through a lawyer Marcus doesn't know about, insurance policy." Adrian actually smiled at that. It wasn't a warm expression. "You've been planning this." "I've been surviving this," Lena said. "There's a difference." They drove in silence for several minutes. Lena watched the city blur past, recognizing the route. They were heading toward Madison Park, one of Seattle's most exclusive neighborhoods. Old money and new money trying to pretend they were the same thing. The SUV turned into a gated driveway. The gates opened automatically, revealing a property that was less a house and more a compound. Multi-level, modern architecture, walls that were probably bulletproof, and enough security cameras to film a documentary. "Welcome to my home," Adrian said as they pulled up to the entrance. "You'll be safe here." The word safe felt foreign. Lena hadn't felt safe in 3 years. Inside was somehow more intimidating than outside. All clean lines and expensive minimalism, the kind of space that felt more like a museum than a home. A woman appeared from somewhere, mid-40s, efficient-looking, with the air of someone who'd seen too much to be shocked by anything. "This is Margot," Adrian said. She manages my household. Margot, Mrs. Carter will be staying with us. She needs medical attention and clean clothes. See to it." Margot's eyes took in Lena's condition without judgment. "Of course. This way, Mrs. Carter." Lena followed her up a curved staircase to a second-floor bedroom that was bigger than her and Marcus's master suite. Margot disappeared and returned with a first aid kit that looked military grade. "Sit," she instructed, pointing to the bed. Lena sat. The exhaustion was hitting now, bone deep and relentless. Margot worked in silence, cleaning the split lip, examining the eye, pressing carefully on Lena's ribs. Her touch was professional, almost clinical. 3 cracked ribs, possibly 4, she finally said. "The eye will heal. The lip will scar slightly. The bruising on your throat suggests strangulation. When did this happen?" 2 hours ago, Margot nodded and opened a bottle of prescription painkillers. "Take 2 of these. They'll help you sleep. I'll bring food in 15 minutes. You need to eat before the medication fully kicks in. Thank you, Lena said. Don't thank me yet, Margot replied, not unkindly. You're in Adrian Voss's house. That comes with its own complications. She left. Lena sat on the edge of the bed and took in her surroundings. The room was beautiful in an impersonal way. Gray walls, white bedding, abstract art that probably cost 6 figures. There was a bathroom attached, all marble and chrome, with a shower that had enough jets to qualify as a car wash. She caught sight of herself in the mirror and almost didn't recognize her reflection. The woman staring back looked broken, used up, a victim. But she'd gotten out. That had to count for something. Lena took the pills Margot had left and felt them start to work almost immediately, taking the edge off the pain. The food arrived, soup, bread, something that might have been chicken. She ate mechanically, tasting nothing, just fueling the machine. Then she laid down on the bed, still in her ruined dress, and stared at the ceiling. Her phone buzzed in her purse. She'd turned it on silent, but not off. Stupid, dangerous. But she needed to know. Needed to see. 17 missed calls from Marcus. 34 text messages. She opened them despite every instinct screaming not to. Where are you? Answer your fucking phone. Lena, I swear to God, if you embarrass me, you're making this worse for yourself. Come home and we'll talk. Answer me. They devolved from there into threats, then promises of violence detailed enough to make her stomach turn. The last one sent 3 minutes ago was different. I know where you are. Voss can't protect you forever. This isn't over. Her hand started shaking again. She turned the phone completely off and shoved it deep into her purse. Sleep came in pieces, fractured and full of bad dreams. She woke to voices, mail, coming from somewhere downstairs. Lena checked the clock, 4:47 a.m. She'd been asleep for barely 3 hours. Her body protested as she sat up. The painkillers had worn off enough for everything to hurt again. She found her shoes and moved to the door, opening it carefully. The voices were clearer now, Adrian and someone else. Told you it was a bad play, the other voice was saying. Marcus Carter isn't some small-time operator. He's connected, Adrian. You take his wife. He's going to respond. He beat his wife nearly to death in their home, Adrian replied, his voice cold. I didn't take anything. She ran. There's a difference. Semantics. He's going to see it as an act of war. Then he sees it wrong. She came to me with information about his trafficking operation. That makes her useful. That makes her a target. For both of you. Lena moved down the stairs carefully, trying not to make noise. She could see them now through the railing, Adrian and another man, younger, maybe early 30s, wearing a suit despite the hour. James, Adrian said, noticing her. We have company. The other man, James, turned and looked up at her. His expression was hard to read. Mrs. Carter, he said, didn't expect you to be mobile this early. Didn't expect to be awake, Lena admitted, coming down the rest of the stairs. But apparently, my husband's reputation is louder than sleep. James didn't smile. Your husband is making calls. To people who make problems disappear. You've put Adrian in a difficult position. I've put myself in a difficult position, Lena corrected. Adrian made his own choice. Did I? Adrian asked, looking at her with that unreadable expression. You could have turned me away at the restaurant. You didn't. That was your decision. You offered me valuable information, and you haven't asked to see it yet, which means you're operating on faith or curiosity or something else. So yes, you made a choice. James looked between them. She's got a point. She usually does, Adrian said dryly, which is precisely the problem. Mrs. Carter, we need to discuss exactly what you know and what you're willing to do with it. They moved to what Adrian called the study, another minimalist space dominated by a desk that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of wood. James positioned himself by the window, watching the grounds. Lena sat across from Adrian and felt like she was being interviewed for a job she wasn't qualified for. Start from the beginning, Adrian said. How did you discover your husband's operation? By accident, Lena said. 14 months ago. I was looking for our tax documents in his office and found a ledger. Old school, handwritten, which seemed strange for someone who prides themselves on being digital. The numbers didn't make sense with his declared income, so I started paying attention. To what specifically? Patterns. Marcus runs Carter Import Solutions, furniture mostly, from Southeast Asia. But the shipping schedules were irregular. Containers would arrive at odd hours, get moved immediately to secondary locations instead of the warehouse. The paperwork never matched the inventory, and he was making trips to Portland and Vancouver that had nothing to do with furniture. How do you know? Because I followed him once. Stupid, dangerous, but I needed to know. He met with men who definitely weren't furniture dealers. One of them I recognized from the news, arrested 6 months later for human trafficking. Adrian leaned back in his chair. And you documented all of this. Everything, photos, dates, financial records I copied from his office, names of associates, details about the shipping routes. I created a pattern map of his entire operation. Why? James asked from the window. Why not just take that to the FBI? Because I wasn't ready to die, Lena said simply. Marcus has connections in law enforcement. I'd tried reporting smaller things before. The abuse, his threats. Nothing happened. If I'd gone to the FBI without ironclad evidence and protection, I'd have ended up in Elliott Bay. So you waited, Adrian said. I built a case. And I built leverage. The safe deposit box, the automatic dead man switch, if anything happens to me. I made sure that killing me would be worse for Marcus than leaving me alive. Until tonight. Until tonight, Lena agreed, when he decided beating me to death was worth the risk. Silence filled the room. James was looking at her differently now, not with sympathy exactly, but with a kind of professional respect. You're smarter than you look, he said. I look like someone's punching bag, Lena replied. That's a pretty low bar. Adrian almost smiled at that. Indeed. Mrs. Carter, here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow, you and I are going to visit your safe deposit box. You're going to show me everything you have on your husband. If it's as comprehensive as you claim, we'll discuss terms. Terms? For your protection, your freedom, and your future. I don't do charity work, Mrs. Carter. If I'm going to war with Marcus Carter on your behalf, you're going to earn that protection. I'm offering you information that could dismantle a major trafficking network. That's not enough? That's the down payment, Adrian said. The rest depends on how useful you continue to be. Lena felt something shift in her chest. Not quite anger, not quite fear. Understanding, maybe. She'd traded one form of captivity for another. The cage was nicer, the captor more rational, but it was still a cage. And if I refuse, then I send you out that door with my best wishes and a burner phone. You'll last maybe 48 hours before Marcus finds you. He's very motivated right now. It wasn't a threat. It was just reality, stated plainly. What exactly do you want from me? Lena asked. Intelligence. Access to your husband's world in ways I don't currently have. Your credibility as his wife, at least until the divorce is finalized. And depending on what's in those files, possibly testimony when the time comes to take him down properly. You want me to be an informant. I want you to be useful, Adrian corrected. There's a difference. Lena looked at James, who shrugged. He's not wrong. Marcus made powerful enemies. Adrian's just the first one you ran to. And if I agree to this, Lena said slowly, what do I get? Protection, a new identity if needed, financial independence, and Marcus Carter's empire burning to the ground. I assume that last part has some appeal. It did. More than Lena wanted to admit. I want complete immunity, she said, for anything in those files that might implicate me. I didn't know about the trafficking until recently, but I've been in the room for other conversations. I need to know I won't end up in prison. Done. What else? I want out of Seattle when this is over. New city, new name, enough money to start over properly. Reasonable. Continue. And I want your word that you won't use me as bait. Whatever we do, I'm not going back to Marcus. Not even pretending. Adrian considered that. The last one limits our options. It's non-negotiable. They stared at each other across the desk. Lena could feel James watching them, probably wondering if this whole thing was about to collapse. Finally, Adrian nodded. Agreed. You have my word. No direct contact with Marcus unless you specifically volunteer for it. Then we have a deal. Excellent. James, have Margot set up Mrs. Carter in the East Wing. Full security protocols. No one in or out without my authorization. Consider it done, James said, pulling out his phone. Lena stood, feeling the weight of what she'd just agreed to settle over her shoulders. One more thing. Yes? Stop calling me Mrs. Carter. That's his name, not mine. I'm Lena. Something flickered in Adrian's expression. Very well, Lena. Get some rest. Tomorrow, we start dismantling your husband's life. She went back upstairs, Margot appearing from nowhere to guide her to a different room, this one in what Adrian had called the East Wing. It was similar to the first room, but with better sight lines to the entrance and what looked like reinforced windows. Lena laid down on another expensive bed and stared at another expensive ceiling and wondered what the hell she'd just done. Her old life was over. That much was certain. The question was whether she'd just traded one monster for another, or if Adrian Voss was something different entirely. Time would tell. It always did. Dawn came gray and cold. Lena woke to Margot standing in the doorway with coffee and clothes. Mr. Voss wants to leave in an hour, she said, setting both on the bedside table. The clothes should fit. They're new. The outfit was simple. Black pants, dark gray sweater, practical shoes. Nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention. The kind of thing you wore when you wanted to disappear into the background. Lena showered, moving carefully around her injuries. The hot water helped with the stiffness, but made the bruises look worse. She dressed slowly, looking at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back looked different from last night. Still beaten up, still damaged, but there was something else now. Purpose, maybe. Direction. She went downstairs and found Adrian in what appeared to be a breakfast room, reading something on a tablet. He looked up as she entered. Better? He asked. Functional? That'll do? Eat something. We have a long day ahead. There was food laid out, pastries, fruit, more coffee. Lena took a croissant and coffee and sat down. Her appetite was still mostly theoretical, but Margot was right about needing to eat. Tell me about the bank, Adrian said, not looking up from his tablet. Security protocols, personnel, best time to access the box. It's a private client facility, appointment only. Security is tight, but professional. Best time is mid-morning, busy enough that we're not conspicuous, not so busy that we're delayed. Good. I've already made an appointment for 10 a.m. under your name. James will drive us. Margot will stay here and coordinate with our security team. You're expecting trouble. I'm expecting Marcus to be predictable. He'll have people watching the bank, probably has been since last night. The question is whether he's stupid enough to try something in public. He's not stupid, Lena said quietly. He's careful, methodical. If he makes a move, it'll be calculated. Which is why we're going in with backup and leaving with everything in that box. Digital copies, physical copies, whatever insurance policies you've built. Lena nodded and tried to eat. The croissant tasted like cardboard, but she forced it down anyway. James appeared at 9:30, looking significantly more alert than he had at 4 a.m. Car's ready. I've got 2 follow vehicles and a clean route to the bank. No obvious surveillance on the property, but that doesn't mean much. They moved out like a military operation. Lena sat in the back of the SUV with Adrian while James drove. The follow cars, she counted 4, not 2, positioned themselves at careful intervals. Seattle looked different in daylight. Still gray, still raining, but somehow less threatening. Or maybe that was just the armed guards in the follow cars. The Bank of Seattle's private client facility was in a converted building downtown, all brick and discretion. Lena had chosen it specifically because Marcus didn't bank there, had no connections to the board, couldn't walk in and charm information out of anyone. They parked in the underground garage. James did a sweep before allowing them to exit the vehicle. Inside, a receptionist greeted them with professional warmth. Mrs. Carter, right on time. Mr. Voss, welcome. Please, this way. They were escorted to a private room where Lena's safe deposit box was brought in, larger than standard, nearly the size of a briefcase. The receptionist left them alone. Lena opened it with shaking hands. Inside was 2 years of documentation, flash drives, printed spreadsheets, photographs, handwritten notes, a ledger that matched the one she'd found in Marcus's office. Names, dates, locations. The entire architecture of Marcus Carter's criminal empire laid out in meticulous detail. Adrian picked up one of the flash drives. How current is this? Updated through last week. I was planning to add more this month, but she gestured to her face. This is extensive, he said, flipping through one of the binders. You weren't exaggerating. I don't exaggerate about things that could get me killed. James was photographing everything with his phone, moving quickly but carefully. This is enough to bring down half of Seattle's shipping industry, maybe more. That's the idea, Lena said. They spent 90 minutes in that room, cataloging, photographing, organizing. Adrian asked questions, sharp ones, the kind that revealed he knew exactly what he was looking at. Lena answered them all, walking him through Marcus's operation like she was giving a briefing. Because that's what this was. A briefing. The first step in whatever war Adrian had decided to wage. When they finally left the bank, Lena felt lighter. The box was empty now, its contents distributed between Adrian's secure facilities and encrypted cloud storage. The insurance policy was still in place. If anything happened to her, the information still went to the FBI. But now she had backup. Now she had allies. Or at least she had Adrian Voss, which might amount to the same thing. They were halfway back to the car when Lena saw him. Marcus. He was standing by the elevator looking directly at her, no anger on his face, just that calm, calculated expression he wore when he was planning something particularly vicious. Keep walking, Adrian said quietly, his hand on her elbow. But Marcus was already moving toward them. James stepped forward, positioning himself between Marcus and Lena. Lena, Marcus said, his voice perfectly pleasant. We need to talk. No, Adrian said. Not loud, just final. Marcus's eyes shifted to him. This doesn't concern you, Voss. She's under my protection. That makes it my concern. Protection, Marcus smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Is that what we're calling it? Interesting business model. Walk away, James said. While you still can. For a moment, Lena thought Marcus would do something stupid. She could see the rage beneath his calm exterior, the calculation running behind his eyes. He was weighing options, measuring risks. Then he looked at Lena, really looked at her. This isn't over, he said quietly. You know that. Yes, Lena replied, surprising herself with how steady her voice was. I do. They locked eyes. All the years of marriage, of violence, of survival, it was all there in that moment. The understanding that they'd crossed a line they couldn't uncross. Marcus turned and walked away. James didn't relax until he disappeared into the elevator. Well, Adrian said mildly, that was civilized. Lena realized she was shaking, not from fear this time, from anger, from the recognition that seeing Marcus in daylight, without the immediate threat of violence, didn't make him less dangerous, just more predictable. He'll come for me, she said. Yes, Adrian agreed. But not today. Today he's still calculating. Tomorrow might be different. They got back in the car. The drive to Adrian's compound was silent, everyone processing what had just happened. When they arrived, Margot had lunch waiting. Lena ate without tasting, her mind spinning. You did well, Adrian said after the meal. At the bank, with Marcus. You didn't break. Breaking is a luxury I can't afford. No, he agreed. It's not. Which is why you're going to survive this. Lena looked at him across the table. What happens now? Now? Adrian leaned back in his chair. Now we turn you into someone Marcus Carter can't touch. Not physically, not legally, not in any way that matters. How? By making you valuable enough that destroying you would cost him more than leaving you alive. By building you into something he didn't see coming. By teaching you how to fight back. It sounded impossible. It sounded like exactly what Lena needed. When do we start? She asked. Adrian smiled. It was the first genuine expression she'd seen from him. We already have. The training started the next morning at 6 a.m., which Lena decided was a deeply uncivilized hour for anything except sleeping or fleeing the country. Margot woke her with coffee and workout clothes. Black leggings, a sports bra, and a tank top that left her bruises on full display. Mr. Voss is waiting in the gym, Margot said, setting the coffee down with the kind of precision that suggested this was routine. You have 15 minutes. Lena drank the coffee too fast and burned her tongue. The gym turned out to be in the basement, a space that looked more like a private dojo than anything she'd seen at her country club. Mats covered the floor, weights lined one wall, and there was equipment she didn't recognize but assumed was designed to make people stronger or more dangerous, or both. Adrian was already there, wearing track pants and a fitted shirt, wrapping his hands with practiced efficiency. He looked up when she entered. "You're late," he said. "I'm 2 minutes early." "Which means you're late. When I say 6, I mean 5:50. Time is the one thing you can't negotiate for." He finished wrapping his hands and gestured to the mats. "Come here." Lena walked over, feeling her ribs protest. "If this is some kind of test to see if I can take a punch, I think last night proved that pretty conclusively. This isn't about taking punches. It's about not being in a position where you have to." He moved behind her, adjusting her stance with hands that were firm but not rough. "Your center of gravity is too high. You lead with your upper body. That makes you easy to knock down. I've never needed to fight before." "You've been fighting for 3 years, Adrian corrected. "You just didn't know it. The only difference now is you're going to learn to fight back properly." He spent the next hour showing her basic defensive positions, how to stand, how to move, how to protect her vital areas without telegraphing her intentions. It was harder than it looked. Lena kept forgetting to breathe, kept locking her knees, kept doing everything wrong. "Stop thinking," Adrian said after she stumbled for the 3rd time. "You think too much. Your body knows what to do if you let it. My body knows how to survive dinner parties and charity auctions. This is different." "No, it's not. You've been reading threats and calculating responses for years. This is just a different language." He demonstrated a simple escape from a wrist grab. Lena tried to copy it and failed spectacularly. "Again," Adrian said. She tried again. Failed again. Again. By the 10th attempt, her wrists were sore and she was breathing hard, and the frustration was making her vision narrow. She yanked her arm back with more force than necessary and actually succeeded in breaking his grip. Adrian smiled. "There. That's what I'm looking for. Anger is useful if you control it." "I'm not angry." "Yes, you are. You're furious. At Marcus, at yourself, at the situation. That's good. Use it." They worked for another 30 minutes before Adrian called a break. Lena sat on the mat and tried to remember how her lungs worked. Her ribs were screaming, and she was pretty sure she'd reopened the split on her lip. "You did well," Adrian said, tossing her a water bottle. "I fell over 6 times. You got back up 7. That's what matters." Lena drank half the bottle and tried to process the fact that Adrian Voss was apparently a motivational speaker in addition to being a crime lord. The cognitive dissonance was giving her a headache. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Doing what?" "Training me. Protecting me. You could have just taken the files and sent me on my way with a burner phone and good luck wishes." Adrian sat down across from her, his expression thoughtful. "I could have, but that would be wasteful. You have skills, intelligence, and motivation. Those are valuable commodities. It makes more sense to invest in you than to discard you. So this is business. Everything is business. But that doesn't make it less real." Before Lena could figure out how to respond to that, James appeared in the doorway looking stressed in a way that suggested problems with a capital P. "We have a situation," he said. Adrian stood immediately. "What kind?" "The kind where Marcus Carter just filed a missing persons report on his wife, complete with photos of her injuries and accusations that you're holding her against her will." Lena felt her stomach drop. "He what?" "He's playing victim," James said, "claiming you ran away after a domestic dispute and he's worried about your mental state. He's got statements from neighbors about your erratic behavior, medical records showing a history of anxiety and depression." "Those are fake," Lena interrupted. "I don't have anxiety or depression." "Doesn't matter. They look real enough, and he's got the police asking questions. Not the ones on his payroll, the ones who actually care about their jobs." Adrian's expression had gone very still. "How long do we have?" "Maybe 6 hours before they show up here with a warrant. Marcus is being very cooperative, very concerned husband. It's a good play." "It's a brilliant play," Adrian said quietly. He looked at Lena. "He's forcing you to either come forward and admit you're here voluntarily, which gives him a paper trail and legal standing to pursue you, or stay hidden and let him paint you as a victim who needs rescuing." "There's a third option," Lena said, her mind already working through the angles. I file for divorce. Today. Emergency protective order based on domestic violence. Get ahead of his narrative. James shook his head. That tips our hand. He'll know you're planning something bigger. He already knows I'm planning something bigger. I showed up at Adrian's restaurant bleeding and desperate. He's not stupid. No, Adrian agreed, but he's cautious. Right now he's testing boundaries, seeing how far he can push. If you file for divorce, you're declaring war. I declared war when I walked out of his house. You declared independence. War is different. They were both watching her now, waiting to see what she'd do. Lena realized this was a test. Not of loyalty. Adrian didn't care about loyalty yet. A test of intelligence, of strategic thinking, of whether she could actually be the asset he was investing in. Then we don't file for divorce, Lena said slowly. We give Marcus what he wants. Sort of. I'm listening, Adrian said. I make a statement. To the police, to the press, whoever. I admit I left Marcus after an argument. I admit I'm staying with friends while we work through our marital issues. I'm cooperative, I'm reasonable, I'm the concerned wife who just needs some space. That keeps you legally accessible to him, James pointed out. In theory. In practice, I'm surrounded by Adrian's security and Marcus can't touch me without proving he's exactly what I'm running from. It buys us time. Adrian was silent for a long moment, thinking it through. It's risky. You'd have to sell it. One wrong word and his lawyers would shred the entire narrative. I've been selling Marcus's version of reality for 3 years. I know how to play the role. This is different. You'd be on record. Everything you say becomes evidence later. Good. Let it be evidence. I'm not lying about anything except my intentions. He did hurt me. We are having marital problems. I do need space. All of that is true. James looked at Adrian. It could work. Keeps the police from treating this as a kidnapping, gives us room to maneuver. It also puts her in the spotlight, Adrian said. Marcus will use every word against her. He's already using everything against me, Lena replied. At least this way I control the message. Adrian studied her for another moment, then nodded. All right, we do it your way, but we do it properly. James, get our lawyer on the phone. I want every word she says vetted before it leaves her mouth. And get the PR team ready. If we're going to tell a story, it needs to be the right story. The next 4 hours were a masterclass in crisis management. Lawyers appeared from nowhere, 3 of them, all sharper than broken glass. They drilled Lena on what to say, how to say it, what questions to deflect, and which ones to answer. They built a narrative that was true enough to be believable and vague enough to be defensible. The PR team was worse. They wanted to know everything. Her relationship with Marcus, her relationship with Adrian, her long-term goals, her short-term strategy. Lena felt like she was being dissected, every piece examined and cataloged. You're presenting as a domestic violence victim seeking safety, the lead PR consultant said. Her name was Rebecca, and she had the kind of intensity that suggested she'd eaten weaker consultants for breakfast. That's your armor. Don't deviate from it. Marcus is the threat. Adrian is a family friend providing temporary shelter. You want reconciliation, but you need safety first. Simple, sympathetic, strategic. I don't want reconciliation, Lena said. Doesn't matter what you want. Matters what the story needs. We can pivot later once the immediate threat is neutralized. Lena looked at Adrian, who was watching from across the room. He nodded slightly. She hated it. Hated playing the victim when what she wanted was to be seen as a survivor. But Rebecca was right. The victim narrative was armor, and Lena needed every layer of protection she could get. The police arrived at 2 p.m., right on schedule. 2 detectives, 1 male, 1 female, both with the kind of tired eyes that suggested they'd seen too much and believed too little. Lena met them in Adrian's formal living room, flanked by lawyers. She'd changed into clothes that Margot had selected, conservative, expensive, but not flashy, the kind of thing you wore to appear respectable without trying too hard. Mrs. Carter, the female detective said. Her name was Rodriguez, according to her badge. Thank you for agreeing to speak with us. Your husband filed a missing persons report. He's very concerned about your welfare. I appreciate his concern, Lena said, keeping her voice level. But as you can see, I'm fine. I left our home after a domestic dispute and I'm currently staying with friends while my husband and I work through some issues. Rodriguez's eyes went to Lena's face, the fading bruises, the split lip. Those are significant injuries, Mrs. Carter. Do you want to tell us how you got them? I'd prefer not to discuss the details of my marriage. It's a private matter. With respect, domestic violence isn't a private matter. If your husband hurt you, I'm not making any accusations, Lena interrupted gently. I'm simply taking some space to think about my next steps. I have legal representation and I'm in a safe location. I don't need police intervention at this time. The male detective, Martinez, leaned forward. Mrs. Carter, are you being held here against your will? No. Has anyone threatened you or coerced you into making this statement? No. Are you aware that your husband has provided medical records suggesting you've struggled with mental health issues? That one almost made her flinch. Almost. I'm aware my husband has made many claims about me over the years. Some of them are even true. But I'm not mentally ill, I'm not being held hostage, and I'm not in immediate danger. I'm a woman who left a difficult marriage and is trying to figure out her next move. That's all. Rodriguez exchanged a glance with Martinez. They were frustrated. Lena could see it in their body language. They'd come here expecting a victim who needed rescue, and instead found someone who was calm, articulate, and clearly didn't want their help. Mrs. Carter, Rodriguez tried again. If you're afraid of your husband, we can help. Protective orders, safe houses, resources. I appreciate that. Truly. But I'm not ready to take those steps yet. Right now I just need time. Time to do what? To think. To heal, to decide if my marriage is salvageable or if I need to move on. Those are personal decisions that require space and clarity. It went on like that for another 20 minutes. The detectives asking careful questions, Lena giving careful answers, her lawyers occasionally interjecting to prevent her from saying anything that could be used against her later. Finally, Rodriguez stood. All right, Mrs. Carter, we've confirmed you're safe and here voluntarily. That's all we needed to establish. But I'm going to give you my card, and I want you to call me if anything changes. If you need help, if you change your mind about pressing charges, anything. Thank you, Detective. I will. After they left, Lena sat very still for a long moment. One of the lawyers, Harrison, the senior partner, smiled approvingly. Well done. You gave them nothing they can use and nothing that contradicts your position. Marcus will be frustrated. Good, Lena said. She felt exhausted, like she'd run a marathon in heels. Adrian appeared from wherever he'd been watching. You handled that perfectly. Natural, sympathetic, but firm. Exactly right. I feel dirty, Lena admitted, playing the uncertain wife when what I want is to burn his entire world down. You will, but first you have to survive the immediate threat. This bought us time. Rebecca, the PR consultant, was already typing on her phone. The statement will go out in 20 minutes. We're framing it as Lena Carter confirming she's safe and asking for privacy during a difficult time. Nothing inflammatory, nothing that gives Marcus ammunition, just enough to neutralize his missing person narrative. He'll respond, James said, probably with something about being relieved she's safe and hoping they can work through their problems privately. Let him, Adrian replied. Every word he says is another piece of evidence of his character. We're building a pattern. Lena stood and felt her legs shake slightly. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind exhaustion and the familiar ache of her injuries. I need air, she said. Adrian nodded toward the back of the house. Terrace. But don't go beyond the sight lines. We're still in threat assessment mode. The terrace overlooked Elliott Bay, the water gray and choppy under overcast skies. Lena stood at the railing and breathed in salt air and tried to remember who she'd been before Marcus Carter. She couldn't. That woman felt like someone she'd read about in a book once. Footsteps behind her. She didn't turn around. You're wondering if you made the right choice, Adrian said, coming to stand beside her. I'm wondering if there was ever a right choice, or if I've just been picking between different kinds of wrong for the last 3 years. That's life. Choosing between various shades of wrong and hoping you pick one you can live with. Lena glanced at him. Is that your philosophy? It's my experience. I've made a lot of wrong choices. Some of them worked out. Most of them didn't. You learn as you go. And this? She gestured between them. What kind of choice is this? The kind that keeps you alive long enough to make better ones later. It wasn't reassuring exactly, but it was honest. Lena appreciated that. What happens now? She asked. Now we wait for Marcus's response. And while we wait, we keep training, keep building, Keep preparing for whatever he throws at us next. You really think he'll escalate? I know he will. Men like Marcus don't accept defiance. He'll test you, try to find a weakness he can exploit. We need to make sure he doesn't find one. They stood in silence for a while, watching the water. A ferry moved across the bay, small and distant. Normal people living normal lives, unaware of the small wars being fought in expensive houses on the hills above them. I want to learn more than just defense, Lena said suddenly. If you're going to train me properly. I don't want to just survive Marcus. I want to be someone he can't touch. Adrian looked at her, something shifting in his expression. That's a different commitment. It means more than morning workouts. It means learning how this world actually works. The rules, the players, the ways power moves. Are you sure? No, Lena admitted, but I'm doing it anyway. Fair enough? He turned back toward the house. Rest tonight. Tomorrow, we start properly. Lena stayed on the terrace for another hour, watching the day fade into evening. Somewhere across the city, Marcus was planning his next move. Somewhere in these walls, Adrian was planning his response. And somewhere in between, Lena was transforming into someone neither of them expected. The next 2 weeks fell into a rhythm that was equal parts exhausting and exhilarating. Mornings meant physical training with Adrian, defense, offense, how to move, how to think tactically. Afternoons meant strategy sessions with James, learning the architecture of Seattle's criminal underworld. Who controlled what, how money moved, where the real power lived. Evenings meant studying the documents from her safe deposit box, connecting dots, building cases within cases. Lena discovered she had a talent for pattern recognition. She could look at shipping manifests and financial records and see the gaps where Marcus had hidden his real operations. She could track money through shell corporations and offshore accounts like she was following breadcrumbs. You would have made a good forensic accountant, James said one afternoon, watching her work through a particularly complex transaction chain. I would have made a good anything, Lena replied, not looking up. I just never had the chance to find out. Marcus's response to her statement had been exactly what they'd predicted. Relief that she was safe, hope that they could work through their problems, respect for her need for space. It was perfect PR, perfectly hollow, perfectly calculated to make him look like the reasonable party. But there were other responses too, less public ones. 2 of Lena's former friends called, both sounding concerned and both asking questions that were just slightly too specific to be casual. Where exactly was she staying? Who was helping her? Had she spoken to a lawyer? He's fishing, Adrian said when she reported the calls, trying to figure out what you know and what you're planning. Don't engage. Then there was the break-in at her lawyer's office, the one Marcus didn't know about, the one who'd set up the dead man's switch with the safe deposit box. Nothing was taken, but files had been searched. Professional job, almost invisible. He's getting desperate, James observed. That's good for us. Desperate people make mistakes. Desperate people also do desperate things, Lena countered. We should assume he's willing to escalate. The escalation came on a Tuesday evening, 2 weeks and 3 days after Lena had walked out of her old life. She was in the study with Adrian, going over financial records, when Margot appeared in the doorway looking tense. Marcus Carter is at the gate, she said. He's asking to speak with his wife. The room went very still. How many people with them? Adrian asked. 2. Both look like private security. No visible weapons, but probably carrying. Adrian looked at Lena. Your call. My call? He's your husband. If you want to see him, I'll allow it. Under controlled conditions, with security present. If you don't, I'll have him removed from the property. Lena's first instinct was to say no, to hide behind Adrian's walls and let Marcus rage impotently at the gates. But that was victim thinking, and she wasn't a victim anymore. I'll see him, she said, but not alone, and not here. The terrace, where there's space and sight lines. Adrian nodded slowly. James, full security detail. I want eyes on Carter's people the entire time. Any aggressive move and we shut it down immediately. 10 minutes later, Lena stood on the terrace while Marcus was escorted through the house by 4 very large, very professional security guards. He looked exactly the same as always, perfectly dressed, perfectly composed, perfectly in control. Except for his eyes. His eyes were furious. Lena, he said, stopping a careful 10 feet away. You look well. I look like someone you beat half to death 2 weeks ago. That's not what happened, and you know it. We had a fight. Things got heated. I pushed you and you fell. It was an accident. You're rewriting history already. That's impressive, even for you. Marcus glanced at Adrian, who stood near the door with his arms crossed. Could we have a moment of privacy? This is between husband and wife. No, Lena said before Adrian could respond. Whatever you have to say, you can say it in front of witnesses. Something flickered across Marcus's face. Anger, yes, but also something else. Hurt, maybe. Or the performance of hurt. Lena was never quite sure which emotions were real with him. I came to ask you to come home, he said. We can work through this. Marriage counseling, therapy, whatever you need. But this, hiding behind Adrian Voss, it's not sustainable. I'm not hiding. I'm surviving. You're making a spectacle of yourself and of our marriage. The statement to the police, the lawyers, all of this drama. It's unnecessary, Lena. We're adults. We can handle our problems privately. Like you handled them privately when you broke my ribs? That was an accident. No, Lena said quietly. It was inevitable. It's what you've been building toward for 3 years. Escalating the control, the violence, the threats. I was just too stupid to leave before it got this bad. Marcus took a step forward. Immediately, 2 security guards moved to intercept. He stopped, raising his hands. I love you, he said, and for a moment he almost sounded sincere. I know I'm not perfect. I know I have problems with my temper, but I love you, Lena. That has to count for something. It doesn't count for anything when you use it as an excuse to hurt me. I never meant to hurt you. Yes, you did. You meant every punch, every threat, every time you made me feel small and scared. You meant all of it. You just didn't expect me to leave. The mask slipped. Just for a second, but Lena saw the real Marcus underneath. Cold, calculating, absolutely devoid of remorse. If you don't come back, he said softly, this gets ugly. For both of us. You think Voss is protecting you? He's using you. Whatever you think you're building here, it's temporary. I'm your husband. I'm permanent. You're about to be my ex-husband. And whatever Adrian is doing, it's better than what you were. Marcus looked at Adrian. You're making a mistake. She's not stable. The medical records I gave the police aren't fake. She's been seeing a psychiatrist for 2 years for paranoid delusions. I never saw a psychiatrist, Lena said. You forged those records. Prove it. I don't have to. You'll prove it yourself eventually. You always do. You're too arrogant not to. For a moment, Lena thought Marcus might actually lose his temper. His jaw tightened, his hands clenched, but then he took a breath and smiled. All right, he said. Have it your way. But when this falls apart, and it will, Lena, because you're not smart enough to play in this world, don't come crying to me. I won't. I'm done crying. Marcus turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. The files you think you have on me, the ones you've been collecting, they won't be enough. I've been doing this a long time. I know how to cover my tracks. We'll see. He left with his security detail, escorted back through the house and off the property. Lena stood very still, waiting for the shaking to start. It didn't. She felt steady, clear. Adrian came to stand beside her. That was bold. That was necessary. He needed to see that I'm not afraid anymore. Are you not afraid? I'm terrified. But there's a difference between being afraid and letting fear control you. Yes, Adrian said. There is. They went back inside. James was waiting with his phone out, looking grim. We've got a problem, he said. Marcus just called in a favor with the DA's office. They're opening an investigation into your business operations, Adrian. Nothing specific yet, just fishing. But it's clearly retaliation. Expected, Adrian replied calmly. What's our exposure? Minimal on anything they could actually prove, but it ties up resources and creates PR problems. Then we create PR problems for Marcus. Lena, those shipping records you found, the ones showing the trafficking patterns, how detailed are they? Detailed enough to build a case, dates, locations, amounts. If we can connect them to actual victims, it's prosecutable. Then that's what we do. James, reach out to our contacts at the FBI. Carefully. I want to know if they'd be receptive to information about a trafficking operation run through Carter Import Solutions. That's escalation, James warned. Marcus escalated when he walked onto my property and threatened my guest. We're just responding in kind. Lena felt something shift in her chest. This was it. The moment when Adrian's protection turned into partnership, when her information became ammunition. If we do this, she said slowly, there's no going back. Marcus will know it came from me. He already knows, Adrian replied. The question is whether we're willing to pull the trigger. Lena thought about 3 years of fear, 3 years of survival, 3 years of being someone she barely recognized. Pull the trigger, she said. Adrian smiled. James, make the call. The FBI took 3 days to respond to James's carefully worded inquiry. 3 days during which Lena barely slept, second-guessing every decision that had led to this point. She spent the hours reviewing the evidence again and again, making sure the case was airtight, making sure she hadn't missed anything that could blow back on her. Adrian found her in the study at 2 a.m. on the second night, surrounded by papers and empty coffee cups. You need to sleep, he said from the doorway. I need to make sure this is right, Lena replied without looking up. One mistake and Marcus walks. One missing connection and the whole thing falls apart. The case is solid. You've checked it 15 times. 16, and it needs to be perfect. Adrian crossed the room and physically removed the file from her hands. It will never be perfect. Perfect doesn't exist. Good enough to convict does. And you're well past that threshold. Lena wanted to argue but couldn't find the energy. She leaned back in the chair and rubbed her eyes. The bruises on her face had faded to yellow and green, almost gone now. Physical evidence of Marcus's violence disappearing like it had never happened. What if they don't believe me? She asked quietly. What if they think I'm just a vindictive wife making things up? Then we show them the evidence. Numbers don't lie, Lena. The shipping manifests, the financial transfers, the pattern of movement, it all tells a story. Your job isn't to make them believe you. Your job is to point them at the truth and let them follow it. And if Marcus has people inside the FBI, if he gets advance warning, he might, probably does, but that doesn't change the fundamentals. Once an investigation starts, it has momentum. Even if he knows it's coming, he can't hide years of operations overnight. Lena looked at him, this man who'd become her unlikely ally. Why are you doing this? Really? You said it was business, that I'm an asset, but this feels like more than that. Adrian was silent for a moment, his expression unreadable. I don't like men who hurt women. I've seen too much of it, been complicit in too much of it, looked the other way too many times. Maybe I can't fix the past, but I can do something about this. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. He set the file down on the desk. Get some sleep. Tomorrow, we meet with the FBI, and you need to be sharp. The meeting was set for a coffee shop in Pioneer Square, neutral territory where law enforcement and questionable associates could have plausibly deniable conversations. James drove while Lena sat in the back trying not to throw up from nerves. Remember, James said, watching her in the rearview mirror, you're a concerned citizen with information about criminal activity. You're not confessing to anything. You didn't know about the trafficking until recently. You're coming forward because it's the right thing to do. I'm lying to federal agents. You're managing the narrative. There's a difference. The FBI sent 2 agents, Special Agent Sarah Chen and Special Agent David Morse. Chen was late 30s, compact and intense, with eyes that missed nothing. Morse was older, maybe 50, with the weathered look of someone who'd been doing this job too long. They sat in a back corner booth, away from the morning coffee crowd. Lena had a latte she wasn't drinking. Adrian had black coffee he actually was. James stayed near the entrance, watching. Mrs. Carter, Chen began, we appreciate you reaching out. Mr. Voss indicated you have information about trafficking operations in the Seattle area. Information about my husband's trafficking operations, Lena corrected. Let's be specific. Morse leaned back, studying her. That's a serious accusation against your husband. It's a serious crime he's committing. How did you come across this information? Lena had rehearsed this part a dozen times with Adrian's lawyers. The truth, carefully edited. I found financial records in his home office that didn't match his declared business income. I started paying attention to his shipping operations. He owns Carter Import Solutions. The patterns were wrong. Containers arriving at odd hours, being moved immediately to secondary locations, manifests that didn't match inventory. I began documenting what I saw. For how long? About 14 months. And you're just coming forward now? I left my husband 3 weeks ago after he assaulted me. Before that, I was afraid of what he'd do if he found out I knew. Marcus Carter is a dangerous man, Agent Chen. I wasn't ready to risk my life until I had no other choice. Chen exchanged a glance with Morse. We've seen the police reports from your domestic violence claim. The injuries were consistent with your statement. My statement was conservative. The reality was worse. Why come to us instead of just divorcing him and moving on? This was the critical question. Lena took a breath. Because I can't live with knowing what he's doing and doing nothing about it. I've spent 3 years being complicit through silence. I'm done with that. If I have information that can stop him from hurting other people, I have a responsibility to share it. It sounded good. Rehearsed, but good. Chen seemed to buy it. Morse was harder to read. What exactly do you have? Morse asked. Adrian slid a folder across the table. Financial records showing irregular payments from Carter Import Solutions to various offshore accounts. Shipping manifests with discrepancies between declared cargo and actual container weights. Communication logs between Marcus Carter and known associates with criminal backgrounds. And a pattern analysis showing regular shipments from Southeast Asian ports known for trafficking. Chen opened the folder and started reading. Her expression didn't change, but her posture shifted slightly, more alert. This is extensive, she said after a moment. Mrs. Carter is very thorough, Adrian replied. Mrs. Carter also committed a potential crimes by removing these documents from her husband's possession, Morse pointed out. Mrs. Carter had legal access to her marital home and her husband's office. One of Adrian's lawyers interjected smoothly. He'd been sitting quietly until now. She copied documents she had every right to view. There's no crime in that. Depends on the documents and the intent, Morse said, but he didn't push it. Chen was still reading, flipping through pages with increasing focus. How confident are you in this analysis? Very, Lena said. I've cross-referenced everything. The money trail alone is damning, but if you can connect it to actual victims, to actual shipments, you have a prosecutable case. That's a big if. I can help with that. I have dates, locations, times. If you can access port records, security footage, customs documentation, you'll find the evidence. It's there. Marcus got lazy about covering his tracks because he never thought anyone would look. Or he never thought his wife would turn on him, Morse said. I'm not turning on him. I'm stopping him. There's a difference. They talked for another 40 minutes, Chen and Morse asking increasingly detailed questions about shipping routes, financial structures, personnel involved. Lena answered everything she could, admitted what she didn't know, pointed them toward sources that might have additional information. Finally, Chen closed the folder. This is preliminary, you understand. We'll need to verify everything, run our own investigation. This could take months. I understand, Lena said. But you will investigate? We'll look into it. That's all I can promise right now. It wasn't much, but it was something. Lena felt the tension in her shoulders ease slightly. One more thing, Morse said as they were standing to leave. Your husband will figure out this came from you. He's not stupid. Are you prepared for that? I'm already living in a secure location surrounded by security, Lena replied. I've been prepared since the night I left. After the agents left, Adrian, Lena, and James sat in silence for a moment. That went well, James finally said. That went carefully, Adrian corrected. They're interested but cautious, which is what we expected. Chen will push for it, Lena said. Did you see how she looked at the financial records? She knows what she's seeing. Morse is the problem, Adrian observed. He's the senior agent and he's skeptical, probably seen too many angry spouses weaponizing law enforcement. I'm not weaponizing anything. I'm providing evidence. Semantics. To him, it looks the same. They drove back to Adrian's compound in silence. Lena stared out the window at Seattle passing by. Her city, the place she'd thought she'd build a life, now transformed into a battlefield. Her phone buzzed, a text from a number she didn't recognize. You made a mistake going to the FBI. There are consequences for that kind of betrayal. Her hands went cold. Adrian? He took the phone, read the message, handed it to James. Marcus? James asked. Or one of his people, same thing. He's escalating faster than we projected, Adrian said, his voice very calm. Which means he's more worried than he wants us to think. Another text arrived. You think Voss can protect you forever? He's one man with limited resources. I have an entire network. It's only a matter of time. He's trying to scare you, Adrian said. Don't let him. I'm already scared. That's not the point. The point is whether I let fear stop me. And will you? Lena looked at the messages again, then deleted them both. No, but the threats didn't stop. Over the next week, they escalated in frequency and specificity. Photos of Adrian's compound taken from different angles, showing sightlines and security gaps. Messages detailing Lena's routine, when she woke up, when she trained, what she ate for breakfast. Someone was watching, close enough to know intimate details. Adrian responded by doubling security, restricting Lena's movements, running counter-surveillance to find the source. They found cameras hidden in nearby trees, tracked rental cars used for surveillance, identified 2 men who worked for a private security firm Marcus had hired. He's probing for weaknesses, James said during a security briefing, testing our response times, looking for patterns he can exploit. Then we change the patterns, Adrian replied. Randomize everything. Different routes, different schedules, different security rotations. Make it impossible for him to predict. Lena sat through these discussions feeling like a chess piece being moved around a board. Valuable, protected, but ultimately passive. She hated it. I want to do more than just hide, she said one evening after another security briefing. There has to be something I can contribute beyond sitting in this compound waiting for Marcus to make a move. You are contributing, Adrian said. The FBI investigation is moving forward because of you. That's passive contribution. I want active. I want to hit back. How? Lena had been thinking about this. Marcus's operation runs on relationships, suppliers in Southeast Asia, distributors here, corrupt officials who look the other way. Those relationships are built on trust and money. If we can disrupt either one, we can hurt him. We're already working on the money side through the FBI investigation, James pointed out. Then we work on the trust side. I know Marcus's associates. I've met them at dinners, functions, business meetings. I know who they are, what they care about, what leverage might move them. If we can flip even one of them, get them to testify against Marcus, the case becomes exponentially stronger. Adrian studied her. That's dangerous. It means direct contact with people in Marcus's network. Everything about this situation is dangerous. At least this way I'm being useful. It also means you'd have to be convincing. These are people who've known you as Marcus's wife. They'd be suspicious of sudden contact. I'll tell them the truth, that I left Marcus and I'm building a new life, that I'm looking for allies, for opportunities. Some of them never liked him anyway. He's abrasive, arrogant, treats people like tools. There are cracks in his network. I can widen them. James looked skeptical. And if one of them reports back to Marcus that you're fishing for information, then we know who we can't trust. But we might also learn who we can. It's worth the risk. Adrian was silent for a long moment, thinking it through. All right, but we do it carefully. You don't approach anyone directly. We create situations where contact happens naturally, charity events, social functions, places where seeing you wouldn't be suspicious, and you never, ever meet anyone alone. Fair enough. And if at any point it feels wrong, if someone seems too interested or asks too many questions, you shut it down immediately. Understood. Then let's start building a target list. People in Marcus's orbit who might be vulnerable to approach. They spent the next 2 days going through Lena's mental catalog of Marcus's business associates, social connections, and criminal partners. She knew more than she'd realized: names, relationships, grudges, weaknesses. 3 years of being the silent wife at dinner parties had taught her to observe, to listen, to remember details others forgot. The first target was Richard Cho, a shipping coordinator who worked with Marcus but had lost money on a deal gone bad 6 months ago. Lena had heard Marcus laughing about it with another associate. Cho had trusted the wrong people and taken a financial bath, and Marcus had found it hilarious. Cho is bitter, Lena said, and he's practical. If we can offer him a way to recover his losses and get out from under Marcus's influence, he might be willing to talk. How do we approach him? James asked. We don't. I do. There's a gallery opening next week in Belltown. Contemporary Asian art. Lots of money moving around. Cho collects. He'll be there. I'll be there. Coincidence. Heavily guarded coincidence, Adrian added. The night of the gallery opening, Lena dressed in clothes that Margot had selected. Elegant but understated, expensive but not flashy. The goal was to look successful, independent, like someone who'd moved on from Marcus and was doing fine. Adrian came with her playing the role of her new patron or associate or whatever story they were selling. James stayed close with a security team that tried to look like they weren't a security team. The gallery was crowded with Seattle's art scene. Tech money trying to look cultured, old money pretending tech money didn't exist, artists navigating both while hoping for sales. Lena moved through it all with practiced ease, the skills from her old life still intact. She spotted Richard Cho near a large abstract piece, studying it with the focus of someone who actually understood what they were looking at. He was mid-40s, Korean-American, always dressed like he was about to close a deal. Tonight was no exception. Perfectly tailored suit, expensive watch, the posture of someone who knew their worth. Lena approached slowly, making it seem casual. "Richard," she said, letting surprise color her voice. "I didn't expect to see you here." Cho turned and his expression went through several shifts in quick succession. Surprise, calculation, wariness, curiosity. "Lena, I heard you and Marcus were having difficulties." "That's a polite way of putting it." "Yes, we've separated." "I'm sorry to hear that." "I'm not." She gestured to the painting. "What do you think? Worth the price tag?" Cho glanced at the card. 80,000 for that? The artist is talented but unproven. Give it 3 years, might be worth double. Or might be worth nothing. Art's like that. So is marriage, apparently. That got a slight smile. "How are you managing? I know Marcus can be, difficult." Difficult is one word for it. I'm staying with friends, figuring out my next steps. It's been an adjustment. I can imagine. Cho looked past her, spotting Adrian across the room. "Is that Adrian Voss?" "Yes. He's been helpful during the transition." "Helpful? That's an interesting description for Adrian Voss." "He's been a friend when I needed one. That counts for a lot." Cho's expression shifted again, understanding dawning. "So the rumors are true. You went to him." "I went to someone who could keep me safe. Marcus isn't taking the separation well." "No, I imagine he wouldn't. Control is important to him." There was an edge in Cho's voice, something bitter and personal. Lena took a chance. "You sound like you have experience with that." "We've all had experience with that. Marcus only knows one way to do business, his way. It works until it doesn't." "The shipping deal last fall?" Cho's jaw tightened. "You know about that?" "I know Marcus thought it was funny. I know he left you holding the bag while he moved on to the next thing. I'm sorry. You deserved better." "Yeah, well, that's business with Marcus Carter. You're always expendable." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the crowd. Lena could feel the moment balanced on a knife's edge. Push too hard and Cho would shut down. Not push enough, and the opportunity would slip away. "I'm building a new life," she said quietly. "Away from Marcus. Away from everything he touches. If you ever want to have a conversation about doing the same, I'm willing to listen." Cho looked at her sharply. "What kind of conversation?" "The kind where we talk about options, about what it would take to be free of Marcus Carter's influence, about whether that's even something you want." "That's a dangerous conversation to have." "I'm aware. I'm having it anyway." Cho studied her for a long moment. "You're different than I remember. Stronger. I'm finally allowed to be myself. That makes a difference." "And Adrian Voss? What's his interest in all this?" "Adrian believes in investing in people who can deliver value." "I'm delivering. The rest is details." Another long silence. Then Cho pulled out a business card and wrote a number on the back. "This is my personal cell, not the one Marcus has. If you want to have that conversation, call me, but not from your regular phone and not from anywhere Marcus might be listening." "Understood. Thank you, Richard." "Don't thank me yet. I haven't decided anything. I'm just willing to listen." It was more than Lena had hoped for. She took the card and slipped it into her purse. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversations and careful positioning. By the time they left, Lena was exhausted but exhilarated. "That was well done," Adrian said in the car. "You read him perfectly. He's angry and he's scared. That makes him vulnerable. But he's also smart enough to be cautious. Will he follow through? Maybe. Probably. He wants out. I could see it in his eyes. He just needs to believe there's actually a way out that doesn't end with him dead or in prison. Can we give him that? Depends on what he knows and what he's willing to testify to. If he has direct knowledge of the trafficking, immunity is on the table. If he's just a peripheral player, he might still be useful for establishing patterns." Over the next week, Lena made contact with 3 more people in Marcus's network. A customs official who'd been taking bribes but was terrified of getting caught. A financial consultant who'd helped set up shell corporations and was having second thoughts. And a logistics manager who'd seen enough to put pieces together but hadn't known what to do with the information. Each conversation was different but followed the same basic pattern: establishing trust, offering alternatives, planting seeds of doubt about Marcus's invincibility. Some of them would pan out, some wouldn't. But Lena was building something, a network of her own, composed of people who wanted out, who'd seen too much, who were ready to turn on Marcus if the price was right and the protection was real. The FBI's investigation was moving too, though slower than Lena would have liked. Agent Chen called with periodic updates. They'd verified some of the shipping records, found discrepancies that matched Lena's analysis, identified potential victims who might be willing to testify. "We're building a case," Chen told her during one of these calls. "But it takes time. Trafficking operations are complex, lots of moving parts, lots of people to interview. We want it to be airtight before we move." "How long?" "Months, probably. Maybe longer. I know that's not what you want to hear." It wasn't. Lena had hoped for something faster, more decisive. But she understood the reality. Justice was slow, and rushing it meant Marcus might slip through the cracks. Then, 5 weeks after Lena had first walked into Aquavine restaurant, everything changed. James burst into the study where Lena was working, his phone in his hand and his expression grim. "We have a major problem," he said. "Marcus just moved up the timeline. He's planning something for this weekend. We don't know what, but our source inside his operation says it's big and it's violent and it's aimed at you." Lena felt her blood go cold. "Source? What source?" "Richard Cho. He called 20 minutes ago. Said Marcus held a meeting yesterday with his security team and some outside contractors. The topic was how to extract you from Adrian's protection and send a message that sticks." "Extract meaning kidnap? Or kill?" The language was vague, but the intent wasn't. Marcus is done playing games. He's going for a direct strike. Adrian appeared in the doorway, already pulling on a jacket. "We're moving you, tonight, somewhere Marcus doesn't know about, somewhere he can't predict." "Where?" "I have a property outside the city. Completely off the books, no paper trail. You'll be safe there until we can assess the threat level." Lena stood, her mind racing. "Or we use this. If Marcus is planning something, we can turn it against him. Set a trap." "Absolutely not," Adrian said flatly. "We're not using you as bait." "I'm already bait. That's the whole point. Marcus wants me, he's coming for me. Fine. Let him come. But on our terms, in a place we control, with enough evidence to bury him." "You're talking about staging an ambush. That's not protection, that's warfare." "Then let's go to war. I'm tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of waiting for Marcus to make a move. We know he's coming. That gives us the advantage. We'd be stupid not to use it." James was shaking his head. "Lena, this isn't a movie. If Marcus comes at you hard, people will get hurt. Probably you. People are already getting hurt. The women he's trafficking, the families he's destroying, everyone in his orbit living in fear. If I can end that by taking a risk, I'm taking it." "By getting yourself killed?" "By making myself the thing Marcus can't resist. He wants control. He wants me back under his thumb. We give him what looks like an opportunity to take that, and when he moves, we have law enforcement ready to document every illegal thing he does. Assault, attempted kidnapping, conspiracy. Add it to the trafficking charges and he never sees daylight again." Adrian was very still, his expression unreadable. "You understand what you're proposing. You'd be putting yourself directly in Marcus's path." "I understand. I'm doing it anyway." "This violates our agreement. I promise not to use you as bait." "I'm volunteering. That's different." They stared at each other across the study. James watched them both, probably calculating odds and outcomes. Finally, Adrian nodded slowly. All right, but we do it my way. Full tactical planning, backup at every angle, FBI involved from the beginning so everything is documented. And at the first sign that the situation is deteriorating, we extract you. No heroics, no last stands. You get out alive, that's non-negotiable. Deal. Then we have work to do. James, get Chen on the phone. Tell her we have a time-sensitive opportunity that requires immediate coordination. Lena, start thinking about where and how we make this happen. Somewhere Marcus would believe you'd be vulnerable, but where we can maintain control. The next 48 hours were a controlled frenzy of planning. Agent Chen was skeptical at first, using civilians as bait went against every protocol. But when Lena pointed out that she was already a target, and this just formalized the threat, Chen reluctantly agreed. We document everything, she insisted. Audio, video, multiple angles. And we have teams ready to intervene at multiple points. This isn't about catching Marcus in the act. It's about building evidence that's prosecutable. They chose a warehouse in Georgetown that Adrian owned through enough shell corporations to make it untraceable to him. It was isolated but accessible, large enough for Marcus to bring a team but contained enough for law enforcement to control. The setup was elaborate. Hidden cameras in every corner, audio equipment wired into the walls, FBI teams positioned in adjacent buildings with sight lines to every entrance. Lena would be there, supposedly meeting with one of Marcus's former associates who'd agreed to provide information about the trafficking operation. Richard Cho had reluctantly agreed to help sell the story. He'd let it slip to one of Marcus's people that Lena was taking meetings in unsecured locations, getting careless, thinking she was safe behind Adrian's protection, but actually exposing herself. Marcus will verify the information, Cho warned during a planning session. He won't just take my word for it. Let him verify, Adrian said. The warehouse has a real lease, real paperwork, showing it's being used for storage. Everything checks out on surface level. By the time he digs deep enough to find my connection, he'll have already committed. The day of the operation arrived cold and rainy, classic Seattle weather. Lena dressed in jeans and a dark jacket, practical clothes that didn't scream bait for a trap. She was wired with audio equipment so small she couldn't feel it, and there was a tracker embedded in her watch that would let Adrian's team follow her movements even if everything went wrong. Last chance to back out, Adrian said as they drove to the warehouse. No one would blame you. I'm not backing out. This ends today, one way or another. James was in the driver's seat, his jaw tight with tension. FBI has eyes on Marcus's location. He's mobilizing. 3 vehicles, probably 6 to 8 people total. They're coming. Lena's heart rate kicked up. This was real. This was happening. They arrived at the warehouse 20 minutes before the scheduled meeting time. Adrian walked her through one final check of the space. Cameras operational, audio clear, exits accessible, backup teams in position. You'll be alone in here for approximately 10 minutes before Marcus arrives, he said. That's your window to change your mind. After that, we're committed. I'm already committed. I know, but I needed to say it. He looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his expression. Then he nodded and left, taking James with him. Lena heard the outer door lock. She was alone in a warehouse, waiting for her ex-husband to try to kill her or kidnap her or whatever Marcus had planned. This was insane. This was necessary. This was both. Lena walked the perimeter of the space, checking sight lines, making sure she knew where every camera was positioned. Agent Chen's voice came through a nearly invisible earpiece. Mrs. Carter, we have visual confirmation on all positions. You're covered. Just stay in the central area and we'll handle the rest. Copy that, Lena said quietly. 5 minutes passed. 10. Lena was starting to wonder if Marcus had figured out the trap when she heard vehicles outside. Doors slamming, voices, footsteps approaching the warehouse entrance. Her hands were shaking. She forced them still. The door opened and Marcus walked in, flanked by 4 men. Professional muscle, the kind you hired when you needed things done quietly and permanently. They spread out immediately, securing the space with practiced efficiency. Marcus looked exactly the same as always, perfectly composed, perfectly in control. He smiled when he saw Lena. "Hello, sweetheart," he said. "We need to talk." Lena forced herself to stand still, to not show the fear racing through her veins. Marcus's smile was the same one he'd worn at 1,000 dinner parties, charming and empty and completely calculated. "We don't have anything to talk about," she said, keeping her voice steady. "I said everything I needed to say when I left." "You said a lot of things, most of them mistakes." Marcus walked closer, his men fanning out to cover the exits. "You went to the police. You went to Adrian Voss. You went to the FBI. That's a lot of conversation for someone who claims to have nothing to say. I told the truth, that's all. Your truth, which is incomplete and strategically edited to make you look like a victim." He stopped about 10 feet away, close enough to be threatening, but far enough that Lena could move if she needed to. "We both know the real story is more complicated. The real story is you beat me half to death, and I ran. Everything else is just details." One of Marcus's men shifted position, moving to block the nearest exit. Agent Chen's voice came through the earpiece, barely audible. "Stay calm. Let him talk. We need him to incriminate himself." Marcus noticed Lena's eyes flick to the man by the door. "You're wondering if you can run. You can't. I have all the exits covered and more men outside. This warehouse is locked down tight." "Then what do you want?" "You came here for a reason. I came here to bring you home, where you belong." "I'm never going back to you." "Yes, you are. One way or another." Marcus's smile faded. "You've made a spectacle of yourself, Lena. Embarrassed me in front of people I do business with. That has consequences." "Everything has consequences. You taught me that." "And you think Adrian Voss is your consequence-free zone? He's using you. You're a weapon to him, nothing more. The second you stop being useful, he'll discard you like garbage." "Maybe, but at least he won't put me in the hospital first." Marcus's jaw tightened. There it was, the anger beneath the control. "I never meant to hurt you that badly. You pushed me. You always push." "I contradicted you about wine. That's not pushing, Marcus. That's having a conversation like a normal human being. You undermined me in front of a business associate." "I mentioned a vintage year. If your ego is so fragile that factual information breaks it, that's your problem, not mine." One of Marcus's men took a step forward. Marcus held up a hand, stopping him. "You've changed," he said, his voice cold now. The old Lena knew when to shut up. The old Lena was terrified. The new one is just done. Done with what? With you. With being afraid. With pretending your violence was somehow my fault. Lena could feel the wire against her skin, recording every word. "You're a criminal, Marcus. You traffic human beings. You launder money. You corrupt officials and threaten anyone who stands up to you. I'm not the problem here. I never was." Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Is that what you told the FBI? That I'm trafficking people? Did you show them your little files?" "I showed them evidence. Dates, locations, financial records, everything you've been doing for years. Evidence that you stole from my private office. Evidence that's inadmissible because you obtained it illegally. I obtained it from my marital home where I had every legal right to be. My lawyers have already verified that. Your lawyers don't understand how this works. I've been building this operation for a decade, Lena. I have relationships with people in law enforcement, in government, in shipping companies around the world. You think some stolen documents are going to bring that down? I think you're worried, or you wouldn't be here." That hit home. Marcus's expression shifted, the mask slipping for just a second. "I'm here because you're my wife and you've forgotten your place. This is about respect. Respect is earned. You lost mine when you started hitting me. I disciplined you when you stepped out of line. That's not abuse, that's maintaining order." Agent Chen's voice crackled in Lena's ear. "We've got everything we need on assault and threatening language. Tell him about the trafficking. Get him to admit direct knowledge." Lena took a breath. "I know about the shipping containers, Marcus, the ones from Bangkok and Manila. I know you're bringing women into the country and selling them to whoever pays. I know about the warehouse in Tacoma where you process them. I know names, dates, everything." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "You don't know anything. You think you're smart because you found some paperwork and made some connections, but you don't understand the first thing about how this business actually works. Then explain it to me. Tell me how trafficking women is just business. It's supply and demand. There's a market. I feel it. That's capitalism. That's slavery. It's opportunity. Most of those women were desperate, living in poverty, going nowhere. I gave them a chance to come to America, to make real money. Not my fault if the work is different than they expected. Lena felt sick. He actually believed this. Or he'd told himself the story so many times it had become truth in his mind. You're delusional, she said. You're lying to yourself because the reality is you're a monster who profits from human suffering. And you're a hypocrite who enjoyed the lifestyle that money paid for. All those charity galas, all those designer clothes, all those vacations. Where do you think that came from? My furniture business? Marcus laughed. You knew. Maybe you didn't want to know, but you knew. You're just as complicit as I am. I didn't know. Not until recently. And the second I found out, I started documenting it. So you could use it against me. So you could play victim and hero at the same time. You're not righteous, Lena. You're just vindictive. I'm done with this conversation. Lena turned toward the door, knowing Marcus wouldn't let her leave, but needing to force his hand. I said what I came to say. You're not going to intimidate me into silence. You're not leaving. Marcus gestured to his men. Two of them moved to block her path. We're going to settle this right now. You're coming back with me, and you're going to call off the FBI, and you're going to go back to being the dutiful wife you were supposed to be. Or what? You'll kill me? That solves nothing. I told you about the dead man's switch. If anything happens to me, every file I have goes straight to law enforcement. I'm aware of your insurance policy. That's why you're not going to die. You're just going to disappear for a while, long enough for me to clean up this mess and restructure my operations. By the time you resurface, if you resurface, the evidence will be meaningless. Agent Chen's voice was urgent now. He's threatening kidnapping. We're moving in. Keep him talking for 30 more seconds. Lena's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it. 30 seconds felt like an eternity. You think you can hold me indefinitely? Adrian will come looking. The FBI will investigate. Adrian Voss has his own problems. I made sure of that. As for the FBI, they move slow. I'll have weeks before they can coordinate a response. More than enough time. Time for what? To make you understand that you belong to me. That you always will. That running was pointless because I own you, Lena. I own your past, your present, and if you don't cooperate, I'll own your future too. The warehouse door exploded inward, not metaphorically, literally exploded as FBI agents in tactical gear breached through multiple entry points simultaneously. Marcus's men went for their weapons, which was the worst decision they could have made. The agents were faster, better trained, already aiming. FBI, hands up, down on the ground now. Everything happened in seconds but felt like slow motion. Marcus's closest guard reached for something at his waist. Gun, phone, didn't matter. An agent tackled him before he could draw it. Another guard tried to run for the back exit and found 3 agents already there. Marcus just stood frozen, his expression cycling through shock, rage, calculation, and finally landing on something like disbelief. You set me up, he said, staring at Lena. I gave you a chance to be human. You chose to be a criminal instead. Agent Chen appeared, flanked by 2 other agents. Marcus Carter, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit kidnapping, making terroristic threats, and participation in human trafficking. You have the right to remain silent. Marcus ignored her, still staring at Lena. This isn't over. I have lawyers. I have connections. I'll be out in 24 hours. No, Agent Chen said calmly, gesturing for her agents to cuff him. You won't. We have you on tape threatening your wife, admitting to trafficking operations, and detailing plans to kidnap her. Your connections won't help with federal charges and recorded evidence. They dragged Marcus toward the door. He was shouting now, threats and promises, and increasingly desperate claims that meant nothing. His men were already cuffed and being let out separately. Lena stood in the middle of the warehouse and tried to remember how to breathe normally. Adrian appeared from wherever he'd been watching, probably the building across the street with the best sight lines. He walked straight to her and just looked at her for a moment. You did it, he said quietly. We did it. No, you did. That took courage I wasn't sure you had. I wasn't sure either. Agent Chen approached, pulling off her tactical vest. Mrs. Carter, are you all right? Did they hurt you? I'm fine, shaken, but fine. We got everything on tape. The threats, the admission about trafficking, his plan to kidnap you. Combined with the financial evidence and witness testimony we've been building, this case is airtight. Marcus Carter won't see the outside of a prison cell for decades. The weight of those words hit Lena like a physical force. It was over. Actually over. Marcus was done. She started shaking and couldn't stop. Adrian guided her to a crate where she could sit down. Adrenaline crash, it's normal, just breathe. James appeared with the bottle of water. Drink this, small sips. Lena drank and tried to process what had just happened. 6 weeks ago, she'd been a terrified woman fleeing an abusive marriage. Now she was a witness who'd helped bring down a trafficking operation. The distance between those two versions of herself felt impossible. What happens now? She asked, when she could talk without her voice shaking. Now you go home, Agent Chen said. We'll need you to come in for formal statements over the next few days, but the immediate threat is neutralized. Marcus is in federal custody. His bail will be denied based on flight risk and danger to witnesses. You're safe. Safe. The word felt foreign. They left the warehouse in a convoy of federal vehicles and Adrian's security team. The rain had stopped, leaving Seattle washed clean and gray. Lena watched the city pass and felt disconnected from all of it, like she was watching someone else's life. Back at Adrian's compound, Margot had food waiting that Lena couldn't eat, and tea she could barely drink. The shaking had stopped, but the exhaustion was overwhelming, bone-deep and relentless. You should rest, Adrian said. Tomorrow we'll start dealing with the aftermath, but tonight you need to sleep. Lena nodded and went upstairs to the bedroom that had become hers. She laid down fully clothed and stared at the ceiling, waiting for relief or satisfaction or something other than this hollow feeling. Marcus was arrested. The trafficking operation was shut down. She'd won. So why did she feel so empty? Sleep came eventually, dreamless and heavy. When she woke, it was late afternoon the next day, sun breaking through clouds for the first time in weeks. There was a note from Margot saying food was in the kitchen, and Adrian wanted to see her when she was ready. Lena showered, changed into clean clothes, and went downstairs feeling like she'd been hit by a truck, but was somehow still standing. Adrian was in his study, going through something on his computer. He looked up when she entered. Better? He asked. Different. Not sure if better is the right word. Fair enough. Sit. We need to talk about next steps. Lena sat, accepting the coffee Margot brought without asking. What kind of next steps? Your testimony. The FBI wants you to testify before the grand jury. That happens next week. After that, there will be a trial, probably 6 months to a year out. You'll need to be available for that. I'll be there. They're also expanding the investigation. Based on what they found in Marcus's operations, there are connections to other trafficking networks, other cities. Your evidence opened up cases in Portland, Vancouver, San Francisco. This is bigger than just Marcus. Lena processed that. Good. It should all burn. It will, but it means you'll be involved in this for a while. Depositions, testimony, possibly relocating if there are security concerns. Your life isn't going back to normal anytime soon. I don't have a normal to go back to. Adrian studied her. You could. New city, new identity, enough money to start fresh. That was the deal. I honor my agreements. I know you do. But? Lena took a sip of coffee and tried to figure out how to articulate what she was feeling. I don't want to run away and pretend none of this happened. I want to see it through. The trial, the testimony, all of it. And after that, I don't know yet. But running doesn't feel right. Even though staying means staying in this world, my world, your world isn't what I thought it was. You're a criminal, yes, but you're also someone who kept me safe when no one else would, who trained me to fight back, who gave me the tools to take down Marcus. That's worth something. It's worth consideration, not necessarily trust. I'm not naive enough to think you're a hero, Adrian, but I'm also not naive enough to think the legal system would have protected me without your help. You did what they couldn't or wouldn't. That matters. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, James was talking to someone on the phone, his voice carrying through the open window. I have a proposal, Adrian said finally. I'm listening. Stay. Not as a guest or someone under protection, as someone who works with me. You've proven you have skills, analysis, strategy, reading people. Those are valuable. I could use someone like you in my operations. Lena blinked. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a partnership. Conditional, obviously. You'd need training, time to prove yourself. But yes, a role in my organization. Doing what exactly? What you've been doing. Finding weaknesses in systems, analyzing operations, identifying opportunities. I run legitimate businesses alongside the less legitimate ones. Someone with your insight could make both more profitable. You want me to help you commit crimes. I want you to help me run an empire. Some of it exists in gray areas, most of it doesn't. You'd have autonomy to choose what you're comfortable with. Lena should have been shocked, should have been appalled. Instead, she was considering it, actually weighing the pros and cons like this was a normal job offer. What happens if I say no? She asked. Then I honor the original agreement, new identity, relocation, financial independence. You disappear and live whatever life you choose. And if I say yes, then you stay here, you train, and you become part of something bigger than yourself. Not necessarily better, but bigger. It was insane. It was exactly the kind of choice that should have been easy to refuse. But Lena had learned something over the past 6 weeks. She'd learned that safety was an illusion, that power was the only real currency, and that the difference between victim and survivor was whether you were willing to fight for control of your own life. I need time to think about it, she said. Take all the time you need. The offer stands. The grand jury testimony happened the following Tuesday. Lena spent 4 hours walking federal prosecutors through Marcus's operations, the evidence she'd collected, the threats he'd made. The jurors listened with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. They indicted Marcus on 17 counts, including human trafficking, money laundering, conspiracy, and assault. His bail was denied. He'd be in federal prison until trial. News of the arrest made headlines. Seattle businessman charged in major trafficking operation. Wife's testimony brings down shipping empire. The stories painted Lena as either a hero or a vindictive ex-wife, depending on which outlet was reporting. She stopped reading them after the third day. Richard Cho reached out through Adrian's channels. He was willing to testify, willing to provide information about Marcus's entire network in exchange for immunity. 2 other associates followed suit. The case was becoming an avalanche. Marcus's lawyers tried everything, claiming the warehouse recording was entrapment, that Lena had been coerced into testifying, that the evidence was circumstantial. None of it stuck. The prosecution had too much, from too many sources, too well documented. 3 months after the arrest, Lena sat in Adrian's study and made her decision. I'm staying, she told him. I want the partnership. Adrian leaned back in his chair. You're sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. Why? Because going back to being ordinary sounds like dying slowly. Because I'm good at this and I want to use those skills. Because you gave me a chance when everyone else saw me as broken, and I want to see where that goes. This isn't a redemption story, Lena. Working with me won't make you a better person. I don't need redemption. I need purpose. There's a difference. Adrian smiled. Yes, there is. All right. Then we start properly. James will set up training protocols, more advanced than what you've been doing. You'll learn the business from the ground up. It won't be easy. Nothing worth doing is. Over the next 6 months, Lena transformed again. Not into a different person, but into a more complete version of herself. She learned how Adrian's organization worked, the legitimate real estate holdings, the shipping operations that were actually legal, the investment portfolios that moved money through entirely proper channels. She also learned about the gray areas, the gambling operations that existed in legal limbo, the information brokering that sometimes crossed ethical lines, the protection services that were one step away from extortion. Adrian gave her autonomy to choose what she participated in. Lena drew lines, sometimes arbitrary ones, about what she was comfortable with. No trafficking, ever. No violence against innocents. No operations that targeted the vulnerable. Within those boundaries, she found she had a talent for strategy. She could look at a failing business and see exactly what needed to change, could analyze a competitor's operation and identify weaknesses, could read people in negotiations and know when to push and when to back off. You're a natural, James told her after she successfully negotiated a property acquisition that had been stalled for months. You see angles other people miss. I spent 3 years analyzing Marcus's behavior to avoid getting hit. That teaches you to read subtext. Marcus's trial was scheduled for month 7. Lena prepared to testify, working with prosecutors to make sure her testimony was unassailable. The defense would try to paint her as vindictive, unstable, coached. She needed to be none of those things. The night before she was supposed to take the stand, Adrian found her on the terrace, staring at Elliott Bay. Nervous? He asked. Terrified, what if I mess up? What if I say something that gives his lawyers an opening? You won't. You're too prepared, too smart, too invested in getting this right. He's going to be there, in the courtroom, looking at me. Yes. I'm not sure I can face him without falling apart. Adrian was quiet for a moment. You faced him 3 times now. The restaurant, the warehouse, his visit here. You didn't fall apart any of those times. Tomorrow won't be different. Tomorrow is different. Tomorrow determines whether he goes to prison or walks free. He's not walking free. The evidence is overwhelming. Your testimony is just one part of a much larger case. The pressure you're feeling isn't real. You've already won. Lena wanted to believe that. Then why does it feel like everything depends on tomorrow? Because you need closure. You need to look him in the eye one final time and take back the power he stole. That's not about the trial. That's about you. He was right. Lena knew he was right. The next morning, she dressed in a conservative suit that Margot had selected. Professional, serious, credible. She wore minimal makeup and kept her hair simple. The goal was to look like what she was, a survivor telling the truth. The courthouse was intimidating, all marble and security and people in expensive suits. Lena sat in the witness waiting room while prosecutors prepped her one final time. Just tell the truth, the lead prosecutor said. Answer the questions directly. Don't elaborate unless asked. If the defense tries to rattle you, take a breath and stay calm. You've got this. Then they called her name. The courtroom was packed. Press, spectators, Marcus's associates trying to look supportive. Lena walked to the witness stand and was sworn in, her hand shaking slightly on the Bible. She looked at the jury, then at the prosecutor. Deliberately did not look at Marcus. Mrs. Carter, the prosecutor began, can you tell the jury about your marriage to the defendant? Lena took a breath and started talking. She told them everything. The escalating violence, the control, the fear, the discovery of the trafficking operation, the decision to document evidence. The night she finally ran, the prosecutor walked her through the financial records, the shipping manifests, the pattern analysis she'd created. Lena explained each piece calmly, methodically, turning years of survival into prosecutable evidence. When the defense attorney stood for cross-examination, Lena braced herself. Mrs. Carter, you claim you didn't know about your husband's trafficking operations until recently, but you lived a very comfortable lifestyle funded by those operations, didn't you? I lived a lifestyle funded by what I believed was a legitimate shipping business. A lifestyle that included designer clothes, expensive vacations, a home in Laurelhurst. You benefited financially from these alleged crimes. I benefited from what I thought was legitimate business income. The moment I discovered otherwise, I began gathering evidence to expose it. Or you began gathering evidence to use against your husband in a divorce. Isn't it true you were planning to leave him regardless of what you found? I was planning to leave because he was abusing me. The trafficking discovery made it more urgent. You claim abuse, but you never filed police reports until after you left. Why not? Because my husband has connections in law enforcement, and I didn't believe I'd be protected. I was proven right when several officers he'd bribed were later identified in the investigation. The defense attorney tried different angles, suggesting Lena was mentally unstable, that she'd fabricated evidence, that her relationship with Adrian Voss proved she was manipulative and calculating. Lena answered each question calmly, refused to be rattled, stuck to the truth. After 90 minutes, the cross-examination ended. Lena was dismissed. As she stepped down from the witness stand, she finally looked at Marcus. He was staring at her with pure hatred, all pretense of the charming businessman gone. Just rage and the promise of violence if he ever got the chance. Lena held his gaze for 3 seconds, Then she smiled slightly and walked out of the courtroom. Outside, Adrian was waiting. "How do you feel?" "Free," Lena said. "For the first time in years. Actually free." The jury deliberated for 6 hours. They found Marcus Carter guilty on all 17 counts. The judge sentenced him to 42 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. Lena wasn't there for the sentencing. She was at Adrian's compound, working on a new project, analyzing a real estate portfolio for inefficiencies. When James brought her the news, she felt nothing but relief. "It's over," he said. "No," Lena corrected. "It's finished. Over implies I'm going back to something. I'm going forward instead." 3 months later, the story had mostly faded from the news cycle. Marcus was in prison. His trafficking network had been dismantled. Several of his associates had taken plea deals and were serving reduced sentences. Lena had testified in 2 additional trials, helping convict people who'd worked with Marcus. Each time got easier. She'd also closed her first major deal for Adrian's organization, a property acquisition that netted $3 million in profit. Adrian had smiled when she'd presented the final numbers. "Not bad for someone who started out as a victim needing protection." "I was never just a victim. I was someone who hadn't found her leverage yet. And now? Now I know exactly what I'm worth. And I know how to make sure everyone else knows it too." That evening, Lena stood on the terrace overlooking Elliott Bay and thought about the woman who'd stumbled into a restaurant 6 months ago, bleeding and desperate. That woman felt like someone from another lifetime. This woman, the one who'd taken down a trafficking empire, testified before grand juries, negotiated million-dollar deals, this woman was who Lena had always been underneath. She just needed the right circumstances to emerge. Adrian joined her carrying 2 glasses of wine. "Celebrating?" Lena asked. "Acknowledging. There's a difference." He handed her a glass. "You've come a long way." "We both have." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the water turn dark as the sun set behind the Olympic Mountains. The city spread out below them, all lights and possibilities and dangers that Lena now understood how to navigate. "No regrets?" Adrian asked. Lena considered the question seriously. Regrets about Marcus, about the years lost, about the person she'd had to become to survive? Yes. Regrets about where she'd ended up? No. "I regret the path," she said finally, "but not the destination." "Fair enough." Somewhere across the city, life was continuing. People were going to work, raising families, living ordinary lives. Lena could have chosen that. The new identity, the quiet disappearance, the chance to be normal again. But normal had never been her strength. Survival was. Strategy was. Turning pain into power and fear into fuel. She'd been Marcus Carter's victim once. Then she'd been Adrian Voss's protected asset. Now she was something else entirely. A partner. A strategist. Someone who'd learned to thrive in the shadows instead of just surviving them. It wasn't the life she'd imagined. It was better. "What's next?" she asked. Adrian smiled. "That depends. How ambitious are you?" "Try me. There's an operation in Vancouver that's been giving us problems. Need someone who can analyze the structure and find the weak points. Someone smart enough to see what others miss." "Someone like me." "Exactly like you." Lena took a sip of wine and felt the pieces click into place. This was her life now. Not the one she'd planned, not the one she'd expected, but the one she'd fought for and earned and chosen. Marcus had tried to break her. Instead, he'd forged her into something stronger. "When do we start?" she asked. "Tomorrow. But tonight, we acknowledge how far you've come." They raised their glasses and drank to survival, to transformation, to the peculiar freedom that came from accepting exactly who you were and refusing to apologize for it. Below them, Seattle glittered in the darkness, dangerous and beautiful and full of opportunities for those brave enough to seize them. Lena Carter had stopped running. Now she was building something entirely her own. And that made all the difference. The Vancouver operation turned out to be more complicated than Adrian had described, which Lena was learning was his version of a test. He didn't hand her easy wins. He handed her problems that required actual thinking and let her prove she could solve them. The issue was a distribution network that was losing money despite moving product efficiently. Someone was skimming, or the margins were wrong, or both. Adrian's people in Vancouver had been trying to identify the problem for 3 months and kept coming up empty. Lena spent 2 weeks analyzing shipping records, payment schedules, and personnel files. She found the problem on day 16, a warehouse supervisor who'd figured out how to manipulate inventory counts just enough that the discrepancies looked like normal shrinkage. He'd been stealing roughly $40,000 a month for almost a year. "How did you catch it?" James asked when she presented her findings. "I looked at his lifestyle. His salary is $60,000 a year, but he just bought a boat. Either he's very good with credit or he has income he's not reporting. Once I knew where to look, the rest was easy." Adrian had the supervisor dealt with, quietly, efficiently, in a way that sent a message without creating bodies. The Vancouver operation stabilized immediately, started turning profit again, within a month. "You have good instincts," Adrian told her afterward. "You see patterns other people miss because you spent years having to predict Marcus's behavior. That's a valuable skill. That's a survival skill that happens to be useful in business. Most valuable skills start as survival mechanisms. The trick is recognizing when you've moved from surviving to thriving." Lena thought about that conversation for days. Was she thriving, or was she just surviving in a more comfortable cage? The question nagged at her until she realized it was the wrong question. The real question was whether she was choosing her circumstances or letting them choose her. And for the first time in her adult life, she was actively choosing. She chose to take on more responsibility in Adrian's organization, chose to learn the legitimate side of his businesses in addition to the questionable ones, chose to set boundaries about what she would and wouldn't participate in. One of those boundaries got tested 6 months into her partnership with Adrian. A rival organization was moving into Seattle, trying to establish gambling operations that competed with Adrian's existing network. The traditional response would have been intimidation, possibly violence, definitely illegal. "We need to send a message," one of Adrian's lieutenants argued during a strategy meeting. "Show them this territory isn't open." "Or we outcompete them," Lena countered. "They're running illegal games with terrible odds and no security. We set up legitimate poker rooms with proper licensing, better payouts, and actual safety measures. We make their operation look amateur by comparison. That takes time and money. It also doesn't put anyone in prison or the hospital. I thought we were trying to build something sustainable, not just react with violence every time someone challenges us." Adrian had been quiet during the debate. Now he looked at Lena. "You're proposing we go legitimate on the gambling operations?" "I'm proposing we make legitimacy more profitable than crime. It's a novel concept, but it might work." He smiled at that. "All right, we try it your way, but if it fails, we revert to traditional methods." It didn't fail. Lena spent 3 months navigating the licensing process, finding locations, hiring staff who actually knew how to run professional card rooms. The first legitimate poker room opened in Belltown and was immediately popular, safe, clean, honest odds, no concerns about getting robbed or arrested. The rival organization's illegal games dried up within 6 weeks. They left Seattle without Adrian having to fire a single shot. "You're changing how I do business," Adrian observed one evening. "Not sure if that's good or bad yet." "It's efficient, that's what matters. It's also ethical in a relative sense." Lena laughed. "We run gambling operations and occasionally engage in morally questionable real estate deals. Let's not pretend we're saints." "No, but we're not Marcus either. There's a spectrum." That was true. Lena had learned that the criminal world wasn't binary. It was 100 shades of gray, and where you operated on that spectrum said something about who you chose to be. She chose to operate in the grayer areas that didn't involve human suffering. Gambling between consenting adults? Fine. Information brokering that didn't put lives at risk? Acceptable. Property deals that skirted regulations but didn't hurt anyone? She could live with that. Everything else she refused, and Adrian, surprisingly, respected those boundaries. "You're the ethical compass I didn't know I needed," he told her once. "I'm the person who won't let you become Marcus." There's a difference. The second year of Lena's partnership with Adrian brought changes neither of them had anticipated. The legitimate businesses started outperforming the questionable ones. Lena's strategic approach, focusing on sustainable profit rather than quick scores, was working. Adrian started listening to her more, trusting her judgment on operations she'd never have been allowed near initially. She became his partner, in truth, not just title. The Seattle City Council is voting on new zoning regulations next month, she told him during a planning session. If they pass, 3 of our properties become significantly more valuable, but only if we can get the right variances approved. Can we? If we contribute to the right campaigns and make sure the economic impact studies show job creation, yes. It's not bribery, it's strategic philanthropy. You're getting good at the semantic distinctions. I learned from the best. They got the variances. The properties appreciated by 40% in 6 months. Adrian's empire grew more legitimate and more profitable simultaneously, but success created new complications. The more legitimate Adrian's operations became, the more attention they drew from law enforcement, from competitors, from people who wanted a piece of what he'd built. One of those people was Vincent Rossi, an organized crime figure from San Francisco who decided Seattle was underutilized territory. He approached Adrian with a proposal, partnership on several ventures, splitting the Seattle market between them. He's testing you, Lena said after Adrian briefed her on the meeting, seeing if you'll accept a subordinate position or if you'll fight for independence. What would you do? Refuse politely, make it clear Seattle is closed, but suggest alternative opportunities in neutral territory. Give him a win that doesn't cost you anything important. And if he pushes, then you push back, but from a position of strength, not emotion. Make it more expensive for him to fight than to accept your terms. Adrian took her advice. Rossi pushed once, found himself facing coordinated resistance from Adrian's network, plus some carefully leaked information to federal investigators about Rossi's operations in San Francisco. He backed off within a month. You're better at this than I am, Adrian admitted. I'm better at strategy. You're better at execution. That's why we work. It was true. They developed a partnership that played to each other's strengths. Lena analyzing situations and planning approaches, Adrian implementing them with the resources and relationships he'd spent decades building. Somewhere in that partnership, something shifted. Lena couldn't pinpoint exactly when, but she started noticing things. The way Adrian listened when she talked, really listened. The way he asked her opinion on matters that had nothing to do with business. The way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she wasn't paying attention. She was noticing him too. The intelligence behind his decisions. The unexpected moments of humor. The fact that he kept his word even when breaking it would be easier. We need to talk about this, she said one night after a particularly successful negotiation that had required them working closely for 16 hours straight. Talk about what? Whatever this is. Between us. Adrian set down the file he'd been reading. I was wondering when you'd bring it up. So you've noticed too. I've noticed that I respect you more than almost anyone I work with. That I trust your judgment. That I enjoy your company. Whether that's something more than professional partnership is a question I've been avoiding. Why avoiding? Because you came to me as someone escaping an abusive marriage. The power dynamic is complicated. I never want you to feel like you owe me anything beyond our professional arrangement. Lena appreciated that more than she could articulate. I don't feel like I owe you. I feel like we've built something together that's valuable. Whether that's just business or something else is a choice we both make, not something you impose. And what are you choosing? I'm choosing to acknowledge that this is complicated and we should be honest about it rather than pretending it doesn't exist. Adrian smiled. That's very diplomatic. That's very non-committal, on purpose. I'm not ready for more than acknowledging the complication. Maybe I won't ever be. Marcus did a lot of damage. I know, and I'm not pushing for anything you're not ready for. I'm just acknowledging, as you said, that the complication exists. They left it there, undefined but acknowledged. Lena found that somehow that was enough. Not everything needed to be resolved immediately. Some things could just exist in potential. The third year brought Lena's biggest challenge yet, a chance to completely restructure Adrian's empire into something that was 90% legitimate. It would mean divesting from several operations, she explained during her presentation. The remaining gambling rooms that aren't licensed, the information brokering that crosses legal lines, a few of the more questionable real estate deals. But what we'd gain is insulation from prosecution, access to legitimate financing, and the ability to expand into markets that won't touch us while we're operating in gray areas. You're proposing we go almost completely legal, James said, looking skeptical. I'm proposing we go completely profitable with significantly less risk. Legal is a side benefit. Adrian studied the projections she'd prepared. This is a 5-year plan. Minimum. You don't rebuild an empire overnight. It also assumes I am willing to give up control over certain operations I've run for decades. It assumes you're willing to evolve. Everything else is details. He was silent for a long time, reading through her analysis. Finally, he looked up. This is good work. Comprehensive, realistic, well-planned, but it's also fundamentally changing who I am and what I've built. No, Lena corrected. It's changing how you operate. Who you are is someone who survives, adapts, and builds power. That doesn't change regardless of whether your businesses are legal or illegal. You sound very certain. I am, because I did the same thing. I was Marcus Carter's wife. That was my identity for 3 years. Then I had to figure out who I was without that role. Turns out, I'm someone who analyzes systems and finds leverage points. That's true whether I'm documenting trafficking operations or restructuring business empires. The methods change. The core doesn't. Adrian made his decision 3 days later. We'll implement your plan, but gradually. I'm not burning bridges until we're sure the new approach works. Fair enough. Gradual is actually smarter anyway. The restructuring took 4 years to fully implement. Lena managed most of it, working with lawyers and accountants and consultants who specialized in making questionable businesses legitimate. It was tedious, complicated, occasionally frustrating work. It was also deeply satisfying. She was building something real, something sustainable, something that wouldn't collapse the moment law enforcement decided to pay attention. Adrian's empire transformed. The gambling operations became licensed card rooms and eventually a legitimate casino in partnership with a Native American tribe. The real estate holdings cleaned up, divested from properties with questionable histories, focused on development that created jobs and community value. The information brokering pivoted into corporate intelligence, still gathering information, but doing it legally through proper investigative channels. By year 4, 87% of Adrian's revenue came from completely legitimate sources. The remaining 13% was gray area stuff that probably wouldn't survive intense scrutiny but wasn't actively criminal. You've turned me into a respectable businessman, Adrian said, looking at the year-end financial reports. I've turned your empire into something that will outlast you. There's a difference. Is there? Because respectability was never the goal. Sustainability was. Respectability is just a side effect. They were in Adrian's study, the same place Lena had first sat across from him and offered to trade information for protection. 4 years felt like a lifetime ago. Do you ever regret it? Adrian asked. Staying, building this, all of it. Lena considered the question honestly. I regret, Marcus. I regret the years I lost being afraid. But this? No, I don't regret building something I'm proud of with someone I respect. Even though it's not a normal life? Normal is overrated. Normal is what people settle for when they don't know what they actually want. And you know what you want? I want to keep building, keep evolving, keep proving that surviving isn't enough. You have to transform what tried to break you into something stronger. Adrian nodded slowly. You've done that. Transformed yourself into someone Marcus wouldn't recognize. Good. I don't want to be recognizable to him. I want to be completely beyond anything he could imagine or touch. That evening, Lena received a letter. It had been forwarded through 3 different addresses before reaching her, and the return address was a federal prison. Marcus. She almost threw it away unopened, then curiosity won. The letter was short, handwritten in Marcus's precise script. Lena, I've had a lot of time to think about what happened between us, about the choices I made and the consequences that followed. I want you to know that I understand now why you did what you did. I don't forgive it, but I understand it. You were always smarter than I gave you credit for. I underestimated you, and I paid for that mistake. I hope you found whatever it is you were looking for when you left. I hope it was worth destroying everything we built together. I hope you can live with what you've become. Marcus. Lena read it twice, looking for the threat hidden in the apology. There wasn't one. Just bitterness disguised as understanding. She burned the letter in the fireplace and felt nothing. Marcus was her past, a chapter that had closed the day he went to prison. What he thought about her choices didn't matter anymore. What mattered was what she thought about them. The 5th year of Lina's partnership with Adrian brought something unexpected: peace. Not the absence of problems, but the confidence that she could handle whatever came. She'd proven herself repeatedly, built something valuable, transformed from victim to survivor to builder. "I have a proposal," Adrian said one morning over coffee. "Another business venture. A personal one. I want to formalize our partnership. Make you a full equity partner with ownership stake in the entire organization." Lina set down her coffee. "That's a significant gesture. It's a recognition of reality. You've built as much of this as I have over the past 5 years. You should own it accordingly." "What's the catch?" "No catch, just a question. Are you in this for the long term? Because if you are, I want that formalized. If you're not, I need to know now." Lina looked at him across the table. This man who'd given her safety when she'd had none, who'd trained her to fight back, who'd become something she still couldn't quite define, but knew was important. "I'm in," she said. "For the long term." "Good. Because I'm not done building, and I don't want to do it without you." They formalized the partnership legally. Lina became a 50% owner in Adrian's empire, with all the responsibility and reward that entailed. It was terrifying and exhilarating simultaneously. "My mother would have hated this," Lina said during the signing. "Your mother?" "She wanted me to marry someone stable and successful. Mission accomplished, technically, just not in the way she imagined." "You married Marcus to please your family?" "I married Marcus because I was 23 and stupid and thought his confidence meant he'd protect me. I didn't understand that controlling and protecting are different things. And now? Now I protect myself. And I build things with people who see me as an equal rather than a possession. That's worth more than whatever my mother's approval would have been." 6 months after becoming equity partners, Adrian suffered a heart attack. Mild, the doctors said, but a warning. He was 62, had been running a criminal empire through sheer will and stress management for 40 years. Something had to give. "You need to slow down," Lina told him in the hospital. "I'm fine. You're stubborn. There's a difference." "I don't know how to slow down. This is what I do." "Then learn. Because I'm not running this empire alone. And if you die from being an idiot about your health, I'll be very annoyed." Adrian actually laughed at that. "Annoyed? That's your primary emotion about my potential death? I contain multitudes. Annoyed is just the most socially acceptable one." He did slow down after that, grudgingly. Delegated more, worked shorter hours, actually took weekends off occasionally. Lina picked up the slack, discovering she was more capable of running things independently than she'd realized. "You're good at this," James observed during a particularly complex negotiation Lina handled solo. "I had a good teacher." "You had several, but you made yourself into what you are. That's not something anyone could teach." It was true. Lina had learned from Adrian, from James, from every mistake and success of the past 6 years. But the synthesis, the person who could analyze operations and set ethical boundaries and negotiate with crime lords and legitimate business people equally well, that was all her. 7 years after walking into Aquavine restaurant, Lina stood on the terrace of what was now her compound, too, watching Seattle spread out below. The city had changed. She'd changed. Everything was different. Adrian joined her, moving slower than he used to, but still present, still sharp. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd turned you away that night?" he asked. "I'd probably be dead, or I'd have found another way." "Hard to say." "You would have found another way. You're too stubborn not to." Stubborn is just another word for refusing to accept defeat. They stood in comfortable silence, the kind that came from years of partnership and understanding. "I never thanked you," Lina said quietly, "for taking the risk, for seeing something in me worth investing in. You've thanked me by building something remarkable. That's worth more than words. Still, thank you for giving me a chance to become who I actually am instead of who I thought I had to be. You would have become yourself regardless. I just provided the environment." Maybe that was true. Maybe Lina would have clawed her way free of Marcus and rebuilt herself without Adrian's help. But she'd never know, and it didn't matter. What mattered was the choice she'd made to stay, to build, to transform pain into power. The organization they'd built together was worth nearly $200 million now, 93% legitimate, employing over 400 people in various ventures. It was an empire built on strategy rather than violence, on sustainability rather than exploitation. It wasn't perfect. Nothing was. But it was theirs, built with intention and choice, and the refusal to settle for survival when transformation was possible. "What's next?" Lena asked, the same question she'd asked years ago. "Next, we keep building, keep evolving, keep proving that you don't have to be a monster to be powerful." "Is that what we're proving?" "It's what you've proven. I'm just along for the ride at this point." Lena smiled. "That's not true and you know it." "Maybe. But I like the version of the story where you're the architect of all this. It's more interesting." They watched the city lights come on as darkness fell, two people who'd found partnership in unlikely circumstances and built something neither could have created alone. Lena thought about the woman she'd been, terrified, controlled, diminished. That woman felt like fiction now, a story she'd read about someone else. The woman she'd become was harder, smarter, more capable than she'd ever imagined possible. She'd learned that survival was just the beginning. That transformation was a choice you made every day. That power came from building something rather than controlling someone. That partnership meant equality, not possession. Most importantly, she'd learned that becoming yourself, your actual self, not the person others expected you to be, was worth any price, any risk, any sacrifice. Marcus had tried to break her. Adrian had given her tools to rebuild herself. But the actual work of transformation? That had been all Lena. And she wasn't done yet. "There's a new opportunity in Portland," she said, pulling out her phone to show Adrian the preliminary analysis. "Real estate development, completely legitimate, significant ROI potential." "Tell me more," Adrian said, leaning in to look at the numbers. They spent the next hour discussing strategy, analyzing opportunities, planning their next move. Building their empire one decision at a time, one choice at a time, one transformation at a time. 7 years ago, Lena Carter had walked into a restaurant desperate and afraid, with nothing but information and the will to survive. Now she stood in her own compound, co-owner of an empire, partner to someone who respected her, architect of her own transformation. She'd learned that you don't escape your past. You transform it into fuel for your future. That survival is admirable, but thriving is the goal. That becoming powerful means building something worth protecting rather than controlling something worth fearing. Marcus was in prison, his empire dismantled, his influence reduced to nothing. Lena was free, successful, and continuously evolving into someone she was proud to be. The difference between victim and survivor was leaving. The difference between survivor and builder was staying long enough to create something new. Lena had done both. And she was just getting started. Below them, Seattle glittered with possibility. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to prove that transformation was always possible for those brave enough to choose it. But tonight, standing on the terrace with Adrian, discussing their next venture, Lena allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. She'd survived, she'd transformed, she'd built an empire, and she'd done it on her own terms. That was worth everything.